Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 13, 2023 meeting of the Milton Select Board. This meeting is being held with a remote component, as one of our members is remote. This meeting, so we are meeting pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, which allows a remote component to these meetings. Item 2 is the Pledge of Allegiance. Before we begin, please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Item 3. Item 3 is public comment, and by policy, we allow 15 minutes for public comment and up to 3 minutes per speaker, and we have at least one speaker with us tonight in person, and so why don't we go first to Ms. DiTullio Agostino.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been a while since I've attended a select board meeting. Diane DiTullio Agostino, former selectman, when we were called, warrant committee member. Sorry about that. So it's working. Diane DiTullio Agostino, former selectman. That's what we were called. And thank you very much for this opportunity. Has a former warrant committee member and a commissioner on the Commission on Disability, which I never thought to ask Lynn how long it's been.
Recording in progress.
Okay, now can I? But I'm not starting all over again. You all know who I am. And it just came as a surprise last week when on Monday I just happened to want to double check that everyone had been sworn in and everybody was up to date and find out that, gee, when we called you to reappoint you last year, because they called me and I told them I was going to try to work on getting a co-chair. So it's interesting that one of the documents that the Select Board's office has said co-chair because we hadn't gotten to add another co-chair. But it just I had no idea that it hadn't transpired. So, you know, your office has had a lot of turnover. How many town administrators have you had? So I'm taking this as an opportunity. It's not about admonishing anyone, but it really is a good advertisement for what the Commission on Disability does. And it's critical. It really is critical for those who are disabled. You know, when I walked in on crutches, it's very easy to say, Diane, what have you done now? However, my particular disability is chronic. I was born with it, and every day, every square inch of the body is in pain. But people come and run and help you when you have crutches. So it's an invisible disability. And it's an amazing town where we have found others, not just with my disability. One woman laid in a van all the way to New York just to have the type of surgery that she needed, you know, from the top of the head to the tip of your toes. And there are just so many unusual disabilities in the town. And some people have promoted them publicly to teach others, but others, you know, by law, we don't have to disclose them. So I just thought this was an interesting opportunity to mention. You know, we have physical disabilities that are both visible and invisible, and then a very key component to the commission. We actually had the suicide prevention come out several years ago in 2018 because there's just so much with mental disability, which brings me to a point that former Chief Richard Wells, back in 2010 when I became ill with a different disability, he researched, I think he told me it took 5 years. Are you all registered and your family members on smart911.com? It's a HIPAA-protected program that the town of Milton implemented because the former program at the police station didn't have enough room to enter all the important information for an EMT to know what to do when they arrive at someone's house or at town meeting. Because unknown to you, the EMTs and the ambulances were called twice during town meeting, and that's why we are continuing to promote fragrance-free. It's not just that it's a fragrance, it could be a chemical. It's the chemicals that, I mean, you might have read recently, New York just is banning certain laundry detergents because of the carcinogenic chemicals in them. And those are the chemicals that you just wash your clothes and you don't really think about it. And then you run to town meeting and you sit next to someone. So people with multiple sclerosis, people with asthma. One woman came up to me after this became evident. Sorry, the pains are really bad tonight. I can't take painkillers. I'm allergic to those too. But I felt this was a really important moment to update you and do some homework for you so that we could move forward in continuing the work we do. So smart911.com is really an invaluable resource. There's an app as well as you can sign up on the computer. But aside from helping individuals with disabilities and employees as well, or visitors, what the commission has done is help to protect the town against the liabilities out there, the fines that would be involved. So last Monday, I found out about the appointments not happening, so we didn't even have a quorum. But fortunately, so we didn't have a quorum, and it wouldn't have mattered because we couldn't vote without enough people reappointed. Instead of having to call each of the 8 members, and by the way, we used to only have 5 members. So we worked feverishly with the school department blog. The superintendent, Mary Gormley, started promoting it. She would ask people through CPAC. You know, at one point, the president of CPAC, I think, was involved, through the little magazine in town, through the Milton Times, through social media. We were the first ones with a social media site. So over the past week, we got the names, and then Thursday night, infamous Thursday night, because I put together, we don't have any admin, and I put together, it had always been people would be appointed for 3 years. Even if someone left, they would fill 3 years. Interesting enough, that's written in the bylaw. It's in the bylaw that if someone has to leave, then the person replacing with them would still finish out their term, which I'm sure you got the email. However, the email, so I listed the names, how to get them appointed, by what term, so we can rotate in the 333 now that we have 9 people. And before I wrote the preface to that email, I stood up, and that's when I took the bad fall. And an hour and a half later, laying on the floor still, I said, oh, I wonder if iCloud saved it to draft. So if that email, if the preface was confusing or anything, I never did get to reread it. And if you ever have any questions on how I explain things, just please call. So we did, between the town clerk and the select board's office, Thursday after 5, I got that note. That's when I started writing the email and ended up submitting it to you at like 11:15 or something. The people that we have recruited weren't recruited because one person knew someone. It was word of mouth. Mary Gormley did a lot of, they're amazing. I'll never forget when Natalie got appointed, Joe, the ADA coordinator for the town, he's sitting there and I didn't tell him what her occupation was. And so we had all these plans to review, and I took them out and Joe said, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden Natalie goes, and blah, blah, blah. And Joe looked at her, what do you do? She's a professor at Wentworth for architecture. And now she's also in construction. So she was phenomenal. Kate Apatham. Kate is now the Director of Human Resources and the SEC 504 coordinator at Harvard. She got stolen from Wellesley because Harvard was having a lot of issues and needed to address them. I could go through the whole list, but what I'd like to do is, we always did get resumes and things. I'd like to gather those for you at a later time instead of going through each person. But they're across town. There's a requirement that people, a certain number of people have disabilities, a certain number of people have disabilities of their children. The most important thing tonight, so you know what the laws are. And you may have, I hope you printed out what our agenda was going to be, because there were 8 ADA items that are of concern. And some of them we had never even thought of before. They only came, like the Electronic Voting Study Committee, when I went back to read their report, they had mentioned that they needed to further consider how to take care of people, because in the front of the warrant, we don't even mention that. I'd like you to take, here, if you could hand these out. I did your homework for you, because sometimes when you see things on the computer.
And Diane, if I may, we do want to give other people the opportunity.
There you go. This is the last item.
Okay.
So what these documents the town of Milton has on their website, we created with town council, the old town council, a form people could notify the ADA. So the biggest thing we really need is an ADA coordinator, and we've always felt the town needs a part-time. There's no real certification. However, someone that is actually trained, maybe shared with another community, because now it's very easy. What I handed you, it is a civil rights violation not to have, these avenues for people to work through. And so any phone calls to me or to Kate, Kate's phenomenal. She also said there is a app that the town could use with no expense to take a risk assessment of things like the buildings and such. So I hope that there's some way you can figure out how to correct the reappointments so that we could have one.
Mr. Chair, she's way past her 3 minutes at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley.
I think we need to start actually taking time of this.
Yep, no.
Because I started the 3 minutes halfway through hers.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think she's just about done.
Right, what I would appreciate is, it'd be really great to have a little clock, because most people just
That's a
have.
good idea.
Yeah, when you can't see things,
Yep.
especially, considering I could have stayed home, could have gone to the hospital, and there's so many other places to be, but this is so important to so many residents in the town.
Thank you very
So,
much.
thank you. Could somebody? Thanks so much. No, that one's fine. Sorry. Yes, thanks so much.
All right, let's check online to see if there's anyone for citizen speak. Is there anyone for citizen speak? Oh, we are.
Nothing online.
Nothing online. Okay.
Oh, this, okay.
Yeah, it's just a sign-in sheet.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Bob Sweeney, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak before the select board. I haven't spoken before you for a while. I welcome Mr. Zoll and the new town administrator, and I know the chair and Roxanne and Richard, and appreciate the time and effort that you put in to the different issues of this town. I'm here primarily, I want to narrow my remarks. I attended the May 26 meeting of the Milton Animal Shelter, which was a noontime meeting that I just caught on the town clerk's website. And I really appreciated that. And the co-chair, Therese Desmond, allowed me to give gave me the opportunity at the end of the meeting to give some comments about what I heard. Tim Sawerski, the town planner, was also there. And I really think it was beneficial, the comments that I expressed to them, and I feel that they were appreciative of my remarks. What I like most from their meeting, in which I really request the same of you, is I loved the sense of urgency at that meeting that I heard from each and every advisory member. And that's what basically was, let's get the shelter done. And that's why I'm here tonight, to say, let's get the shelter done, and let's put it where it's now a no-brainer, on the Governor Stoughton land. The animal shelter up there originally had started in the barn up there, after the dog leash law was passed in like '69, they started doing animals up in the barn of the Men's Arms House. And then the shelter itself was built approximately around 1980. And it's been, to me, a dilapidating, embarrassing condition for years. And I just marvel at, like, people like Stan Dworsky, who year after year came up to that place and volunteered. I just think that's tremendous. But my point is, let's get the animal shelter done. And let's stop, in a sense, beating around the bush. We've been talking. My daughter's turning 19 in October. I remember when she was like 5 years old, she and her buddy were collecting money for the new animal shelter. You know, that's 14 years ago. I remember going to lots of fundraisers, but that's a lot of years ago. I mean, we don't want to be derelict here. We want to get the job done, and we don't want to be an embarrassment to other towns. And we owe it to the dogs, and we owe it to the citizens of this town to have a first-class shelter. And I'm just hoping we can get it done now, and I want to just finally address the legal aspect. There's been those over the years that said, oh, you can't put it up there, you got to get it off of there. That is not true. And I'm saying that based on, I spent 2 years as the co-chair of the Governor Stoughton Land Trust Committee. I was also the former chair of the Governor Stoughton Trustees. I was in attendance at several meetings with the charitable division at the Attorney General's office, and coincidentally, one of those people that headed the charitable division is a current resident of Harlan Street. Her boss, I found out, and he approached me and spoke to me privately about getting it done up there with the plan, lives on Sias Lane. I also have a document that I wanted that Mary McGettrick is Mel's attorney, and she asked me for the document that I've basically been using that sort of is the legal okay. It's a letter written by a Joanna Soros, and basically what it says is, and it backs up what sort of like what Tim said at the meeting. It basically says, you can't do this piecemeal. At the time there was 40 acres, 36 acres of land, and the Attorney General's Joanna Soros was saying, hey, don't tell me you want to build an animal shelter without telling me what you're going to be doing with all this other land. So basically, it was plan. I notice on your agenda the words business plan. So the Attorney General's, in their opinion, has been very consistent.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
you're
Number
at
is-
5 minutes right now
Okay.
with him.
Sorry to bother you, but I think it's an important
We need
subject.
to start timing this,
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Anyone else for citizen speak? Anyone online? All right, item 4 is discussion approval of Milton Arts Center, East Milton Library. And subpart A is the lease amendment with the Milton Arts Center, for the East Milton Library located at 334 Edge Hill Road. Mr.
Mr.
Milano?
Chair,
Yes?
Oh, you want a motion?
I'm sorry?
You want a motion?
Well, I just want to hear what it is
All
from
right, go
Mr.
ahead,
Milano
go ahead.
first.
I have been working with Joan Clifford on looking at potentially amending the lease between the town and the Milton Arts Center. Her request is basically if the Milton Arts Center is going to continue to put money into the building above and beyond the $12,000 requirement that's in their lease, then they're looking for, if they do exceed that cap, that would the select board consider waiving rent at times where they invest more in the building than the lease currently requires them to. I don't have a lease amendment for you today. We're continuing to work on that with Murphy Hesse, but would bring that back to the select board if that is something that you are generally amenable. Obviously, once the particulars are ironed out, we'll have that in front of you, but just wanted feedback tonight on that idea.
Comments or questions? Ms. Musto?
I have a question. How long is the lease agreement now?
It's, I believe it's
Is it 10 or
10-year
5?
lease agreement currently with payments each year.
And how far into it are we?
Yeah, when it expire.
Year one.
Oh, year one.
Yeah, we just executed it in the fall.
Yeah.
Other comments or questions?
I think the Milton Arts Center is a tremendous resource for the town. I would be interested in looking at the amendment.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Do you want to approve it tonight?
So, well, we don't have it. So why don't we put it on the agenda? Why don't we have town council draft the amendment, see if we can get an agreement with the Milton Arts Center on the language and put it on for the 27th.
Will do. Thank you.
Item B is application to the Community Preservation Committee. Mr. Milano.
Sure, and I apologize, Joan couldn't be here tonight because they have a board meeting, so she asked, I said I could speak on her behalf, and obviously we can circle back if there are any continuing questions. The Milton Arts Center did apply to the Community Preservation Committee for CPA funding in this year's round of funding. They are still going through the eligibility process to determine whether all of these applicants would be eligible. Joan's project that she put forward is to replace the windows, which are old, and the key part of the eligibility determination by the CPC will be whether the building is historic and whether this project would keep it historic under the conditions of the CPA. So just wanted to put that on the select board's agenda so they understood. I think perhaps for a vote to approve it might be after eligibility is determined, but I just wanted, since it is a select board building, to bring that to your attention if there are any questions or concerns about moving forward on that CPA application.
Comments or questions?
I'll make a motion to, is it up?
I think we're going to wait until whether
Okay.
eligibility is determined, and then it'll come back to us.
No concerns at the moment then, I assume. Okay, thank you.
Item C is the installation of a shade structure.
Yes, this is in your packet for an image of what they're looking to install in the backyard of the Milton Arts Center. This is more of a longer-term project. They anticipate that if they got approval from the select board to do it, that they would probably line it up for next year. But because it would require some permitting and some work, they'd like to start doing that now. So if any questions on that, I'll take them. But otherwise, if the select board is okay with it, we can let them know.
Comments or questions?
Let's go.
Ms. Bradley? No? All right, is there a motion?
No, Mr. Chair, I did raise my hand, sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'll lower it. So this did come up in front of the Finance Committee, as you might remember. And it was something that they wanted to have for an ARPA grant. And I'm just curious about the funding for the shade that they're looking for. As I said during the ARPA, or during the financial subcommittee meeting, is that they could potentially use the pergola or the shade structure on the East Milton overdeck island oasis. So I'm just curious, Nick, if this is that they're going to do it, or if they're still thinking about doing it and putting up just tents as shades?
For this summer, they will continue to use tents for shade this year. They would like to finance it, fund it on their own, and install it for next year. But as it's a select board property, they are looking for an okay before they go too far down that path.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
But they're looking to finance it themselves.
Correct.
Thank
Ms.
you so
Musto.
much.
I just wanted to say, I know many years ago, we were looking into some shade structures for different things, and there may be some organizations that do have some funding for that, or they used to be. Ones that were like preventing skin cancers and things like that. So it might be something to look into if there are any grants for that.
Other comments or questions? Mr. Wells?
So just a follow-up to Ms. Bradley's comments, is Mr. Milano may know the estimate for the pergola, which when we picked this, was, I think we thought it was about $250,000. The estimate has come into Mr. Berkeley at $650,000 to have it constructed, of which we currently only have, I think, $100,000, which we're not guaranteed is going to be able to be encumbered, that came from Representative Driscoll. So we have to find a way to come up with another $500,000. I think, Aaron, we're a couple of years away from that happening, perhaps maybe as long as 3 to raise that kind of money to get it done.
Other comments or questions? Is there a motion?
Do you want a motion to?
It seems to me they need to have permitting, and they'd like to
Yes.
start the process, so I think they want an indication for the board, from the board. So I think if the board is prepared to vote, we can vote on whether we want to move forward, or we can defer it.
I'd make a motion, Mr. Chair, to move forward on the installation, do we want funding and installation, or just installation of?
Just to approve.
To approve the installation of a shade structure at the rear of the Milton Arts Center.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Make sure. All right, all those in favor, it'll be a roll call vote because we are remote.
I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Bradley, Ms. Bradley,
I'm sorry, I'm in DC.
That's okay.
Yes.
and alphabetically, Ms. Musto,
Yes.
and Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Mr. Zoll.
Yes.
And myself, yes. All right. Item 5 is discussion approval of, conditional approval of a common victular license for El Barrio Mexican Grill at 27 Central Ave and 537 Adams Street. And I think we have the applicant,
Joe
and
Andre
maybe
Vasquez.
we'll have the applicant promoted.
He is coming now.
Okay. And while he's doing that, do you want to set the stage, Mr. Milano?
Sure. Mr. Vasquez has approached the town on behalf of El Barrio Mexican Grill, which has 2 locations in the city of Boston, for conditional approval of common victular licenses. Excuse me. He will still need to go through the permitting process with the Board of Health, and likely will require some building department permits. But the town may issue common vic licenses subject to completion of those other requirements, and that is what is before you this evening.
And this is Mr. Vasquez?
Correct.
Mr. Vasquez, do you have anything, is Mr. Vasquez with us?
Yes.
Mr. Vasquez, do you have anything that you'd like to add before we discuss this?
Hi, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. So, no, actually, I would like to, go through the process as Bert mentioned there, and do like the requirements you guys have, for me to be able to open after I get the CV provisional permit.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Comments or questions?
Ms. Lombardi has raised her hand as former owner of the plate, where he's going.
Oh, okay. I believe we have Ms. Lombardi, who is the landlord for one of the properties.
Yeah, so this is the site of the original plate on Central Ave?
That's right.
Yeah.
Ms. Lombardi, you there?
Hi, yeah, sure. Thanks, Select Board. I just wanted to say that I believe that Joe Andrew is a great, excellent fit for the neighborhood down at 27 Central Ave. The plate had a really awesome run there in terms of turning that location back into a food venue once the town deli had left and it was converted into a real estate office. So just personally, I worked really hard to find somebody who would bring another food venture into that spot. And it's my belief that Joe Andrew is just an excellent fit. He happened to be one of the opening line cooks for Steel and Rye that when they opened in 2014. So he's very familiar with the neighborhood and the clientele and just loves the location. So yeah, his current restaurant mimics the plates model, both in terms of the size of his menu, the fact that he's an independent entity, and his price points are very in line with what the plate was when we were there. So I wish him great success, and I appreciate always the support that the Select Board gives us independent restaurant operators. I wish we could have stayed there, but, the pandemic was one thing that really did hit our restaurant industry hard. Again, I think the town showed up with support for us. So thanks for that. And we are very happy up at 10 Bassett Street. And we look forward to watching his success there. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Lombardi.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion for conditional approval of the common victual licenses. E Barrio Mexican Grill located at 27 Central Avenue and 537 Adams?
Well, that's the question, but you can make the motion and we
I
can.
had my hand raised prior.
Oh, sorry, I didn't say, I apologize. Go
I
ahead.
know,
Ms.
I know.
Ms.
Can I make it,
Ms.
you all right
Salzman,
if I make it just for purpose of discussion?
No, this is pre-discussion.
Ms. Bradley?
Thank you so much. So when we approved the ARPA grant for the plate, we discussed at length about the Central Ave location. And I'm a bit concerned about the funding that was given to the plate through the Financial Services Committee that you and I served on, Mr. Chair. It was my understanding that they would be going back in to Central Ave. That was one of the main questions I asked them. So I'm wondering what this is. Are they subletting to somebody else? Are they giving this
I will
over?
raise my hand.
Suzanne, I can't hear you.
Well, hold on.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, just hold on. Erin, why don't you finish, and then we'll
Sure.
move to Ms. Lombardi.
So I'm concerned about what it is we're actually approving, Mr. Chair, because is this part of the ARPA grant that we're approving that is getting funding?
Yeah.
That was supposed to be for the plate. So I just want to know what's exactly happening here.
Yeah, so this, as I understand it, has no relationship to the ARPA grant in any way. So, Ms. Lombardi, would you like to say something else?
Sure. Sure. I mean, this is a different topic. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm remote.
Yes, no, you're
Okay,
coming
sure.
through loud and clear.
I'm working with my account specialist, who has been, filing paperwork on that grant. Our catering kitchen had just opened before the pandemic at Central Ave. And we paid rent up until and are still paying rent in that location as of June 2023. So there was never a plan to reopen there, but to really look for a great fitting tenant. And I think if you go back and look at details of that grant, you'll see that. And I'm happy offline tomorrow to, address more as far as that's concerned. But I'm really appearing tonight just to sort of introduce Joe Andre, since, I did work hard to find a good fit, and to just thank the select board for their continued support. But I'm really just here on behalf of, commenting on his reputation and the fact that the neighborhood is going to be very, very happy to have a food venture go into that location. And everybody, as far as I'm concerned, our customers who come in and over in the Lower Mills Central Ave location knew exactly our plan, which, was to find another tenant for that space. And we are not subletting that space. He has taken over the remainder of the lease and will renegotiate with the landlord. That's still the same landlord when we were there, if that's helpful.
So, Mr. Chair,
Ms. Bradley.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So my question would be is how much of the ARPA grant that we approved previously, which I remember distinctly being also for Central Ave, is being used? How much of it has been used to furnish what has been nothing there, which we were told that it was supposed to be something else. We can go back to those minutes. But Mr. Chair, I'm concerned about how this looks for the ARPA grants and how this looks for us giving money as a town to a business that decided to sublet to somebody else. That's funding that came through the state. It's funding that that honestly was given to that business to create something there, not sublet it. In fact, I can distinctly remember that we talked about having something in the central location months ago. I mean, we're going back almost 8-9 months now. So I will not be voting in favor of this, and it mainly has to do with the fact that it looks, to me, not okay with the ARPA grants that we have given them. We have given the plate an enormous amount of money for our ARPA grants, not for like the state budget, if you were to put it in comparison. But our ARPA grants have given them a lot of money. And so I guess I am concerned about what this looks like. Were we just giving them money so that they didn't go into default because they couldn't open up a business on Central Ave? To me, this doesn't seem right. So I will not be voting in favor of this.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Mr. Zoll.
So,
Just a quick, oh, sorry.
Just 1 second. Just 1 second, Ms. Lombardi.
I just wanted to, this is a clarifying question. The 537 Adams Street location, this is not the same landlord, this is a different landlord?
So there are two locations. There's one in East Milton, and then there's one, there's the Central Ave location.
So my suggestion might be that we create two motions for this, one for one location, one for the other. And I wouldn't see that Ms. Bradley would have an objection to the second location because it doesn't, she's giving me the thumbs up. I don't know if we have to approve both of them or neither of them, but that was just a question that I asked.
So there've been an application for both of them. So we can separate them if that's the motion that one or more of the members want to make. Other comments or questions?
I'm fine with that.
I will say that I'm in favor of moving forward, and then we can, because this is about getting a business down into that location, and we can move. We can go back and have a discussion about the ARPA grant, which may be separate, which is separate, it seems to me, and we can go back and have a discussion about that. But in terms of getting a business down in that location, it seems to me that there's a benefit to that. Ms. Lombardi, did you wanted to say something more? Is that it? Are you okay?
I'm ready.
yes,
Oh, we can't hear you.
I think she muted herself.
Oh, I think you muted yourself, Ms. Lombardi.
okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, loud and clear.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify, it's just a legal thing, but we are not subletting that space. The lease has been reassigned. It's not a sublet. And I mean, I'm happy to go back and look at the meeting, but I don't necessarily, we have not received any funds for Central Ave. We have received funds for the 10 Bassett Street. So that's my comment. And the other thing is we had always stated that we didn't plan to reopen in Central Ave. So it's probably makes sense to go back and look at that meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Lombardi. Other comments or questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Bradley.
I'd like to then look at the ARPA grant that we granted them and what exactly it was for, because I can tell you we discussed Central Ave, and there was a big part of it that covered Central Ave. And if that's not the case, then I would like my ARPA money back.
Okay. Other comments or questions?
I'm ready to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Are we all right? So I'll make a motion. You want to make two and we can vote on them separately? How's that?
That's
All
fine.
right, so I'm going to make a motion to approve the conditional, as for the conditional approval of the common vic license, El Barrio Mexican Grill at 27 Central Ave. And then I make a second motion for conditional approval of common vic license.
Why don't we take the
Oh, you wanna
first
vote? You
motion?
wanna vote?
Yeah, why don't we
Okay,
take the
okay.
first motion?
I'll second that first.
All right. The motion has been made with respect to 27 Central Ave only to approve a common victular license in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 6. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley,
No.
Ms. Musto,
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Mr. Zoll.
Yes.
Mr. Zoll is yes. Okay. Now, do we have another motion?
Now I'll make a motion for conditional approval of convict license, El Barrio Mexican Grill at 537 Adams Street, Milton.
I will second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Ms. Musto,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
No, yes. Yes.
Mr. Zoll.
Yes.
Mr. Zulish, yes. I'm sorry for being a little hesitant on my alphabet, but I will get it as the meetings go on. My alphabetizing skills will improve. All right.
Until 9 o'clock.
Exactly. All right. Item 6 is a discussion update of the animal shelter project, and I'm going to ask. We've asked some people to join us today. Mr. Freitag is on the phone. I think we have representatives from the Milton Animal League and from the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee. So if they want to come join us at the table and maybe add a few seats to that. While we're doing that, just to give a quick synopsis of where this board is and what this board has done on this issue in the last several years. Just a very quick synopsis of the decisions that this board has made starting in 2015 on this issue. And this is with respect to just minutes and decisions by this board since 2015 up until the present. Just a very quick synopsis of that. On February 18th, 2015, this board, or the board at the time, approved a memorandum of understanding with the Milton Animal League for cooperation in the funding, site selection, construction, operation, and maintenance of a new animal shelter. One of the town's responsibilities in that memorandum of understanding was to select a site for the new shelter subject to the Milton Animal League's consent. On July 21st, 2015, the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee that was set up by this board requested that the animal shelter be built at the Randolph Ave site, and the board at the time voted unanimously to approve that request. And since that time, the parties have continued to work with respect to that site and that request. Those efforts have included the Milton Animal League donating nearly $300,000 for site plans, architects, project managers. This is over the years, in our minutes. All of the funding came from the Milton Animal League in the efforts to create a new animal shelter at the Randolph Ave site. To that end, on the funding side, on March 8, 2016, the Milton Animal League and the town entered into a funding agreement for the process for the financing of the animal shelter. And several times over the years, pursuant to that funding agreement, the Milton Animal League provided, and this board accepted, funding for work at the Randolph Ave site, including $10,000 for finance geotechnical testing, $200,000 for design services, and another $50,000 for design services. During this time, the board was also made aware that the Copeland Foundation had pledged funding to help get the animal shelter built. Board was made aware that on October 10th, 2019, that funding was increased for a total commitment of $2.5 million to the Milton Animal League to assist in the funding for the construction of a new animal shelter. Now, fast forward, late fall of 2021, the town issued an RFP for construction of the animal shelter at the Randolph Avenue site. In December of 2021, the bids received in response to the RFP exceeded the available funding by more than $2 million. And on January 19th, 2022, the bids were rejected by this select board because of the overage in cost. In an effort to bridge the gap of the funding, throughout the spring of 2022, the Select Board, the Capital Committee, the Warrant Committee, and ultimately Town Meeting in May of 2022 approved $700,000 in funding for the animal shelter construction. On November 1st, 2022, the Select Board and the Milton Animal League amended their Memorandum of Understanding and their funding agreement to provide for the town's $700,000 contribution to the funding. in a further effort to bridge the gap in funding. In September 2022, on the recommendation of the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee, this board approved a new project manager and a plan for a smaller modular animal shelter at the Randolph Ave site. On January 3rd, 2023, this board was advised that the new project manager, Hill International, was developing a new request for proposal for a smaller modular animal shelter at the Randolph Ave site to be released in early February. At that same meeting, the board was asked, as Governor Stoughton trustees, to consider an alternative proposal to locate the animal shelter at the Governor Stoughton Town Farm. On January 10th, 2023, the Governor Stoughton trustees heard a proposal from two residents described as patrons of in the minutes as patrons of the Milton Animal League, and one of whom was a member of the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee, for an alternative proposal to locate the animal shelter at the Governor Stoughton Town Farm. However, according to the minutes, the trustees suggested that they continued to support the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee's plan for a modular unit at the Randolph Ave location. Neither the Select Board nor the Governor Stoughton trustees took any action on an alternative proposal. On March 7th, 2023, the Select Board was advised that the RFP for the modular animal shelter at the Randolph Ave site would be advertised on April 12th. On April 4th, approximately a week before, the Select Board was advised that an anonymous donor was prepared to contribute $2.5 million towards construction of a new animal shelter, but only if the animal shelter was not built on the Randolph Ave site, but was rather built at the Governor Stoughton Town Farm. 1 week later, on April 11, 2023, this board voted to authorize the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee to investigate whether or not rebuilding the animal shelter at the Governor Stoughton Town Farm site was appropriate, while continuing its work with respect to the Randolph Ave site. Finally, on April 18, 2023, the Select Board was advised that the project manager's estimate for construction of a new modular shelter at the Randolph Ave location exceeded the Milton Animal League funding available for that construction, and the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee agreed or advised the Select Board that it had agreed not to make a recommendation to the Select Board with respect to the RFP for a modular animal shelter at the Randolph Ave site. And that is where we are. Subsequently, the Governor Stoughton's trustees on April 11th also requested that Town Council follow up with the Attorney General's office with respect to the use of the Governor Stoughton Town Farm as an animal shelter site. So, my proposal for the board is to hear first from Mr. Freitag to give us an update on the discussions with the Attorney General's office with respect to the use of the Governor Stoughton Town Farm as an animal shelter site. Second, to get an update from the Milton Animal League, if they have one, for us on the status of things. And third, for our advisory committee to give us an update on this, if they have one. And if that's acceptable to the board, that's how we'll go forward. All right. Mr. Freitag, could you give us could you give the board an update on the discussions with the Attorney General's office with respect to using the Governor Stoughton site as a possible location for an animal shelter?
Yes, thank you, and good evening, members of the Select Board. Kevin Freitag from the Office of Town Council. On May 24th, I, along with Nick Milano, Tim Zawinski, Marion McKettrick, and Susan Phillips, spoke with two individuals, two attorneys from the Charities Division at the Attorney General's Office. We spoke with Jonathan Green and his colleague, Emily Gibralt. During the conversation, we presented to them a summary, I would suggest, of what Mr. Zulis has just provided to the board, focusing on the most recent events, particularly the appearance of a anonymous donor and the amount that was being proposed by the donor, with certain restrictions, particularly that an animal shelter be built on the Governor Stoughton property. We we let them know that the proposal at this time was that the animal shelter would essentially be a tenant of the Governor Stoughton property, that it would rebuild the animal shelter, which is there currently, and take over some additional space, which is, I think, used as a paddock of sorts behind one of the buildings that's located there. Tim Zawinski provided some great additional information in terms of the structure that's there right now and what was being proposed and how the site would work essentially with the construction of a new building there. It was also laid out for both Jonathan Green and Emily Gabrault that the construction of the animal shelter, or the rebuild of the animal shelter, if you will, would not affect in any material way the number of affordable units that could be placed there. That was something that was discussed quite a bit, whether the placement of the animal shelter would limit the amount of affordable housing that could be there. Mr. Zawinski didn't think that it would do so in a material way. But the Attorney General's office, through the attorneys that I just mentioned, had a number of questions about how the use of the land, which in part currently is being used obviously for the Milton Animal Shelter, but that its continued use for the Milton Animal Shelter, how that would be consistent with the terms of the trust. And the attorneys were quite clear to point out the distinction between what would be sort of in the best interest of the trust versus what would be in the best interest of the town. And obviously that's a nuanced and sort of tricky situation for the select board, which sits as both select board for the town of Milton and also as trustees for the Governor Stoughton Trust. At the end of that conversation, and actually didn't even wait until the end, the attorney suggested that what needed to happen was that it seemed to them that the trust would be engaging in sort of a business venture at this property if it were to go forward with a lease to a rebuilt animal shelter. And in doing so, the trust would need to, the trust would need to identify what sort of business relationship would exist. It would need to do so by way of a business plan, which should be developed and then brought back to Jonathan Green and Emily Gabrault for their review to determine whether, in their opinion, and in the opinion of the Attorney General's office, that sort of a relationship, a business relationship, would be consistent with the terms of the trust. And I think sort of front and center in their mind was what benefits would be provided to the trust? Would there be income that would be generated, and how might that affect the purposes for which the trust was created? How would it enable the trust to carry out those purposes? And so they wanted to see in specifics what that relationship would look like. So it was our understanding at the end of that call that a business plan would be put together, and it's my understanding that the Milton Animal League has in fact done that, and that's been presented to the select board. I've seen a copy of it at this point. So that was sort of where we left things with the Attorney General's office. They wanted us to do some homework and come back to them. Keep in mind the Attorney General's office in this role is acting as sort of an enforcement agency for the terms of the trust. So some 10 years ago, when the town decided to consider selling part of it, or rather I should say that Governor Stoughton trustees considered selling part of that land to Pulte for development, they consulted, the trustees consulted with the Attorney General's Office's Charities Division to get their input on the process, and eventually the Attorney General's Office was a party to an action that was filed in the probate court by the Governor Stoughton trustees, asking permission to sell that land from the probate court, and the Attorney General's Office was a party that assented to that request. So they were on board with that. So certainly the idea here is to continue to consult with the Charities Division to get their buy-in and their so their preliminary approval, if you will, of a plan to use that property. So I think that's as best a summary as I can provide of the conversation that we had back on the 24th, but I'm happy to answer any questions about anything that might still be unclear.
Thank you, Mr. Freitag. Any questions from the members?
I have one. For
Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Kevin. So, Kevin, I have one question for you. You know, in my entire professional life, for as long as I can remember this, going back to the days of John Cronin, to Bob O'Leary, to John Flynn, your predecessor, Mr. Sweeney was correctly when he referred to Joanna Soers and then to Mary Ames and now to Jonathan Green. I don't think it is true that it is a line item in the police budget that pays the rent for the use of that building. But I've never once, ever, from any attorney general or anyone sitting in the Public Charities Division or anyone, if the shelter were currently built out of brick and mortar and we're not on the verge of falling down, I've never heard anyone ever talk about removing it from there. No one's ever talked about not letting them stay there, nothing. And they have been there for 44 years. And that, I just think that brings up an interesting question. I'm aware with what was said tonight, what Mr. Sweeney said in, I think the chair mentioned as well, is that when the time came to want to first build a new shelter, it was Joanna Soers who said, let's look at the big picture, which ultimately wound up in the sale of the larger parcel, which we now know as Pulte Homes. So I think that's something that you need to kind of talk about, because I think if you were not there, I don't think the Attorney General would ever be asking us to move. I've never, ever heard them. They've never said that. You know, there's never been like a timeline. It just exists. It's being pushed by us because the lifespan of that building is over, well past over. So that's just something for you to think about. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair. You don't have to answer it now, Kevin. You can think about it, but I just think it's worthy of consideration by you.
Other questions for Mr. Freitag? Ms. Musto.
I just have a comment. I know at one of the first meetings that we had with regards to the property, I had brought up, what if, you know, say tomorrow, God forbid, there was a fire there, or, you know, a hurricane ripped off the roof or something, would they be able to rebuild the structure? And I think at the time, Kevin, you said, I'm not quite sure about that. So it's just, you know, again, if something happened tomorrow, you know, would they say, no, you can't? I mean, that's the question I guess I would have in general, because I had asked that before.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you.
I don't know if Mr. Freitag has a response to that, or it was more of a rhetorical question, I think.
Because the scenarios you
Well-
described actually happened.
Well, okay, well, let's just see if Mr. Freitag has anything, and then we'll go to Mr. Wells. Kevin, are you all set?
Well, I would just say that it is hard for me to anticipate exactly what the Attorney General's office would do. I think that just as a matter of sort of trust law, you as trustees have a duty to maintain the assets that are in the trust. And so from time to time up there, the trustees have seen fit to spend money to repair the buildings, which are part of the trust assets. And from, you know, in fact, there's also been instances where the trustees have spent money to take down some of the buildings up there where there were safety issues. So the trustees do have some obligation to maintain the items that are of value to the trust, and to the extent that those buildings are of value and continue to be of value and need to be preserved, and the trustees are acting appropriately when they take steps to do that. There's not a clear line, though, I would suggest, between simply repairing and performing maintenance and then, you know, moving into something new, a rebuild or something else. That line is something that I might be able to make perfectly clear, but there is a line there, and I think that that's something that the Attorney General's office would be interested in.
Mr. Wells.
So just a point, the roof has come off twice and been replaced twice in just the scenario that Ms. Musto describes, but I do not believe we went to the attorney. I think it was the trustees that paid, came from the government Stoughton funds to pay to replace the roof both times.
Mr. Zoll.
So just a quick question for Kevin. It was suggested to me, we're looking at the use of the land for affordable housing, that given the criteria of what affordable housing looks like in Milton, that it would be potentially debatable by the Attorney General's office whether affordable housing was technically for the benefit of the poor. So I was just wondering if there was any clarity on that came up during the discussion with the Attorney General, or was it specifically focused just on the animal shelter?
The short answer is no, there was no additional clarity. That's something that we've discussed with that office quite a number of times. And we've never gotten a clear answer on that, but I would also just point out that they have always said to us, you need to come to us with a specific proposal about what the affordability criteria would be, and then we can give you some guidance on whether or not we think that fits within the quote unquote benefit for the poor of Milton language that's in the trust.
Thank you.
All right, so now that we've heard from Mr. Freitag on the meeting with the Attorney General's office, perhaps we'll give the Milton Animal League the floor, if they wish, to give us an update. I think you were last here in April, and at the time you advised us about this new donor. And so if you can give us, and Marion, if you might introduce yourself, and yeah, I'm
Yes,
sure
I'm
you
Mary McKettrick. I'm not actually a member of the Milton Animal League. I'm their counsel. They hired me in 2014 when this idea of working with the town and pledging to cover the cost of a new animal shelter came about as a matter of discussion. And I agreed to do that, and I helped draft with town council the documents that you've already described. So I've been involved since then. From time to time, I've prepared correspondence for the Milton Animal League with counsel for the Copeland Foundation, which had an offer for funding. And of course, I just say, in terms of the Milton Animal League and representing them, they need to build a new shelter yesterday or the day before or 10 years ago. Time is the enemy of this project. And you can see that because it's taken a long time to design a new shelter. It came out, as they often do, too expensive and had to be redesigned, which took another year. And every year that goes by, construction costs increase. But the funding that's been promised has stayed the same. Of course, it's a very generous grant from the Copeland Foundation. So the only real change in funding was this potential offer of funding a lot more, I'd call it a matching grant really, to what the Copelands are doing, if the shelter were to be located in a different place. And this was in March. I first heard about it, I think, at the end of March. I was called by a representative of the donor who wants to remain anonymous. The primary condition was the shelter would be at the Governor Stoughton location. So that's a problem because you voted that it would be at the access road. We've worked on it since 2014. We're ready with an RFP for that project. The only fly in the ointment, I guess, is that the estimates right now still somewhat exceed the funding that we have. Currently, it's $3.2 million plus a $40,000 grant from appropriation from the legislature, plus funds on hand at the Milton Animal League. They have an investment fund currently, has about $790,000 in it. They have to keep some of that money for operations, but they continue to fundraise and expect to be doing substantial fundraising soon. That's something for you to keep in mind. So there is a gap. It's not an enormous gap. It's still possible, certainly to do the project at the access road site. We would have more funding if we changed sites, but we have to spend $50,000 to study the Stoughton site. But that's not the real obstacle. The real obstacle is, do we have permission to do it? And here you've got a difficult situation. You've got the Board of Selectmen because they're responsible for selecting the site. You have the Governor Stoughton trustees who are responsible for carrying out the mission or the purposes of this land that was given many, in the 1700s by Governor Stoughton. And then you have the Attorney General's office that advises us on how to properly carry out charitable trusts, which is what this is. And we've always had to go back and get advice, and you have, from the Attorney General's office. So we had that meeting, and they said, well, we'd like to see a business plan. My impression of what they meant was a plan for the site, because it's always been, we want a plan for whatever land you have left. We went back immediately, and it was nice. I was invited to a meeting with the new president of the Milton Animal League, Therese Desmond Sills, who's here tonight with me, and Susan Phillips and Victoria. These are all members of Milton Animal League. And we worked, and Susan was instrumental in helping us draft it, trying to draft something that looked like a business plan. And we paid a lot of attention to this issue of, does the use of a shelter at a site impinge on the value of the prospects for affordable housing at the site. And also, we were asked whether it would affect housing around the site. And our answer to that is, we've been there since 1979, and we've never had a complaint from any of the surrounding properties. And since the shelter was located there, there've been two huge developments, Pulte development and Quissa Brook. And so, I think the answer to that is it's not a problem, never has been. And the new shelter is sound and, it's supposed to be fully insulated and modern, and there won't be any noise generated by the shelter. But my problem and the league's problem, and I think the advisory committee's problem is the donor wants an answer on whether we have permission to go forward with studying for the use of this site. We need an answer, and they're pressing me for an answer. I was hoping up or no, really, today. That's an answer which says, yes, go ahead and study it. We think we'd like you to do it. We'd like you to locate the shelter there. And by the way, we agree that the site that we've given you as a very rough plan, that's a good site if the shelter were to be located up there. So we're asking a lot of you and of the Governor Stoughton board. But we need to get that answer, because what I'm being told is that, this is, well, I'll back up. This is a time-limited request because the Milton Animal League needs to get this shelter built. We can't wait another year. So if it takes you a year to figure out what you're doing up there, and you can't figure out whether you can locate the shelter here and have a good project otherwise with affordable housing or whatever you want to do, then you need to tell us that now. And it's a reasonable position. I can understand that you might take that position. In that case, we'll go back to what we were doing. We've spent almost 2 months now looking at this alternative. We'll deal with the funding that we have, unless perchance this other donor could agree to give some funding to the other site. I mean, we will ask, but I was certainly told clearly the condition was siting at the Stoughton property. So I think that's what I'm saying that we're asking you tonight, but I probably talked too long. The chairman of the advisory committee is here. Therese Desmond-Sills is here, and perhaps they'd each like to say something as well. And maybe, I don't know whether I've completely represented their position. So.
If someone from the Animal League, and we'll get to the advisory committee after the Animal League, so if someone from the Animal, if you all want to add anything.
Sure. I think that you covered very, very well the position that we're in at this time. And I think our priority is to get this shelter built as soon as possible. And now we've had a 3-month delay looking at the Governor Stoughton site, 3 or 4 months. And every month the prices keep going up, and they've been going up since we've put this at the original RFP out to bid. And so we need to know which direction to go in. I mean, we could probably get enough money just to meet what the cost estimate is on the access road, but that won't be enough money to cover everything, because there's always overages and change orders, and we need a little bit more than what we have. I think everybody on the advisory committee agrees with me that it really doesn't matter which site it is. It's where it can be done, most expeditiously, because the current conditions are deplorable and have been for a long time. And this back and forth and keep coming to roadblocks where it's kind of frustrating. So yes, I don't know if you can approve the location of an animal shelter there, or if it then has to go to the Attorney General, and how long all of this could take. That, if it's going to be delayed another 6, 8, 10 months or a year, I think we need to seriously look at the access road site.
Thank you very much. I notice Ms. Bradley's hand is up, and I apologize, Ms. Bradley. I don't know if your hand was up for Mr. Freitag or it's up for the current panel.
No, my hand is up because I would just like to remind everybody that we are a select board. And while we used to be called selectmen, I would appreciate it if we can counter check in real time about the terms that we're using. So that's it.
I'll try to do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for members of the Milton Animal League from the members? Seeing Mr. Wells.
I'll wait to talk at the end, and then I'm going to address Ms. McGettrick.
Okay, Mr. So So we can hear now from our advisory committee, the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee, and Mr. Daly, I think, is here from the committee
Yes.
and can give us an update if he wishes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here with my co-chair, Therese Desmond, who is also a co-chair of the committee. So where we are is we are still pursuing the dual path that you requested we pursue, which means that we have produced the business plan that Mr. Freitag discussed earlier. I believe that has been sent to you by Mr. Zawinski. It would have been sent either late last week or early this week. If it hasn't yet been, it will be soon.
Yeah, I believe we've received.
And so that is, we still, I think the work that still needs to be done on that business plan is the rent that the Milton Animal League will pay to the Governor Stoughton Trust, the fair market rent, which I think is something that I suppose I could ask you now. Has that been ascertained, what the rent will be for that? But I think that's the last piece of the business plan.
No, I don't believe it has.
Just to let you know, from our perspective. And that has really taken up, the business plan and looking at the Governor Stoughton site has taken up the better part of the last 2 months. We have tabled the RFP, which is basically completed. From my perspective, within a week or 10 days, we could probably put out an RFP for the access road. We have chosen not to, and that has been at the recommendation of the project manager, Paul Kalus, who works for Hill. And he has suggested that because of what he calls bidder fatigue, he doesn't want bidders to bid on a project the Milton Animal Shelter once, and then 6 months later bid on a different site. And for real professionalism, reasons of professionalism, all of which I understand. I do think at this point we're weighing goods, though. Those are goods that we value, but also time and getting this project done and getting more information is another competing good I think that we ought to consider. So personally, as a member of the committee, I think it is time for us to get more information about what exactly the cost is to build at the access road. The estimate that we received from Paul Kalus in April was $4.4 million, if you added everything in. $2.2 million of that was for the building alone. So half of it was estimated for the site work and all of the other things other than the construction itself. We have an estimate from Avalon Building, which is a modular building company here in Boston. George Tagayas reached out to them, worked with them to get a rough estimate. Now, this is not an official estimate, but it was written up. They did submit something to Mr. Tagayas, who then forwarded that to the committee. What Avalon estimated for our 4,000 square foot plus building was just a little over $600,000 for the building alone. Now, that does not include site work. It does not include the foundation. It does not include what they call the sill and finish work. So we understand the cost is going to be much more than $600,000. The point that I'm making is there's a massive difference between the $2.2 million that Mr. Kallos gave us for the building alone and the $600,000 that Mr. Tagayas worked to find. So if you split the difference, it's $1.4 million, right? If you just average out the two, you're looking at, and then if you add in a couple $1 million for site work and foundation and all the rest, which I think, is a conservative figure, you're within what we potentially could have with the 2.5 committed from Copeland, very generous grant, the $700,000 from the town, and then the Milton Animal League, with the understanding that they can't zero out the account, but that they can contribute. We're right there. We're close. At this point, I think getting more information would be helpful. An RFP would give us that information. The threat, obviously, is bidder fatigue and a potential show of professionalness. I think that is outweighed by the need for more information, because there is no guarantee that we're moving forward at the Governor Stoughton site. While it may be advantageous, we're already 2 months behind where we would have been. We, in fact, as I look back, we would have been we would have been making a decision sometime in the next couple of weeks on on a builder had we put out the RFP when we could have. So happy to take questions, but that's my report on where the committee is now. What we're looking for from the select board is more direction in terms of where you would like us to go. We can certainly continue to pursue the parallel path, and I think that makes sense. But would you like us to send you an RFP?
Questions from the members? And why don't we just open it up, questions or comments at this point for the members? Questions for anyone and comments about anything with respect to item 6?
One question.
Mr. Wells.
Mr. Chair, for Mr. Daly, he should really do his homework because I believe that $2.5 million commitment is based on a 7,000 square foot building, and you're 3,000 square feet below that, still looking for $2.5 million.
So I'll let you take that.
Well, Mary McKettrick again, just because I'm the one who's been corresponding with the Copeland attorney, and we've been pretty careful to correspond regularly. So 2018, 2019, 2020, most recently 2022 in January. And those, as we have corresponded, I have copies of the letters. I think I've sent them to the town administrator. We've described the status of the project, including the location, including the original plan, which may have started out as 7,000 square feet, then went down to 5,000 square feet, but still an architect-designed building, a really nice-looking building. And then, after that, a report on the bids, and I guess kind of an outreach as to, gee, would you like to sit down and talk to us? Naturally, the hope being maybe you could promise a little extra. Copeland Foundation has made it clear $2.5 million is all that they can promise for this project. But we have been informing the attorney, who presumably has been informing the board of what this project is at each of those intervals, including some very detailed letters, including detailed cost estimates for the building, and all at the access road site. So this is not a project that's unknown in terms of what's now planned for that $2.5 million. I do want to clarify that. Copeland Foundation, of course, is a private foundation and will do whatever it feels best. And we certainly respect their right to do that. But they have been kept informed so far about what's been happening. Not on this current, I have not communicated directly since March with anyone from the foundation.
Other comments or questions?
Yes.
Oh, Ms. Nesbitt.
I believe the advisory committee will be meeting Thursday, and we'll be asking our OPM to do another cost estimate. I think we're probably all on the same, we haven't voted that yet, but I believe it makes sense for him to meet with Avalon and sharpen pencils and just see if the cost estimate that we have is accurate. He believes in the company that did that cost estimate, and they do a lot of municipal work, so he doesn't think they're far off, but from our conversations with Avalon, it looks like, we might be able to make some savings if they find a DCAM certified contractor to work with. And I don't know if anybody here knows how long it would be delayed to.
So just to repeat, and I apologize, I should have said, try to talk into the microphone. So just to repeat for other people who heard, the plan of the advisory committee is to meet Thursday and to discuss asking the project manager to work on another cost estimate for the Randolph Ave site.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
And we received your approval for going out for an RFP for that site. So if the advisory board decided to do that instead of waiting for the Governor Stoughton site, could we do that, or do we have to come back and ask for another?
Well, it's up to the board. I think it's my view. The board should probably decide whether an RFP goes out. That was the decision that the board was prepared to take in April, and we didn't move forward with that after feedback from the advisory committee. So it's this board member's view that this board should decide before an RFP goes out. Other comments or questions?
I just have one more.
Oh, yes, please, yes.
I didn't introduce Victoria Shea, and she's the treasurer for the Milton Animal League, and she also is on the advisory committee. So I just want to make sure she was introduced.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
Mr. Chair. Oh, Ms. Bradley.
Ms. Bradley? No. Mr. Wells?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I I do not like to bring anger into this room. And I'll address my comments to Attorney McGetrick, who I have grave respect for, someone who sat on this board for 12 years, right? I think the longest serving member to ever sit on this board. Actually, someone appointed me as chief of police. And I've, both in my years here, my time as chief, and then going in my 7th year here, and in my personal life, I've supported this project in every way I can think of, shape, form. The goodness that the volunteers and the animal shelter people do is incredible. The number of animals that they've put out for adoption, the families they've helped, it goes on and on and on in the money that they raised. But as my colleagues on this board know, we received some very disturbing information over the past 3 days. Information that truly, truly bothers me, because we're a community of citizens, and one of the things that I really have no tolerance for in my life anymore is hurting people. And one of them you made reference to tonight, who worked very hard, a bright, brilliant woman who I never knew, who came to this effort and brought a great deal of help. As far as the new donor, Mrs. McGetrick knows, I came to her, I've spoken with that donor. That donor's only reason is to do something good for this community. There's no, and I think you can second me on this, there's no malfeasance, there's no agenda, there's nothing other than they have an interest and they want to do this and they are willing to make a pledge. It's not uncommon in philanthropy for nonprofits to make donations, legal donations. It's not dark money. It is not dark money. And I've seen evil more ways than most people could count, and this is clearly nothing evil about this. But everything that I've supported in this ends tonight. I'm out. I no longer support the relationship between this board and the Milton Animal League. I don't support it as a member of the board, and I do not support it personally. And Mr. Chair, I believe the time has come where 2 things have to happen. One is, I think you need to, one thing you did tonight, I think you need to, Ms. Milano should give the MOA to all the members, the current members, because this MOA goes back to even before when I was on the board. I think when it was first signed between the select board and the animal league, as far as the building of it. I think everyone should be able
That's
to
correct.
read it.
Yes, it's online,
Should be able
and
to read it.
if the members don't have it, then they should.
It's online? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, so that.
Yeah, it's
that
under,
makes
it's
sense.
under the advisory committee's website, but certainly we can make sure
The
that
second
everyone
thing
has
is,
it.
I think that I would like for you to talk to town council. I believe the time's come that we would like an audit from the Milton Animal League on monies, expenditures, minutes, all those things. This is a significant adventure.
Okay.
And that's it. I'm very sorry, Mrs. McGetrick, all of you, I'm done with this.
Okay.
What transpired this week is wrong and mean and unjust. And we don't hurt people.
Sir, there's always
I-
2 sides to
Ma'am.
a
All right,
story.
all right,
You're out
let's,
of order.
well,
And that's all I have to say.
So I'm out. I'm very sorry, but I no longer support this endeavor.
other,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
thank you. Other comments or questions from the members? Ms. Musto.
Thank you. I wanted to say that if you have a donor that's willing to give you $2.5 million to keep the animal shelter where it is, I think it's sort of a slap in the face not to do that and not to seriously look at that. I think that's wrong. So that's a problem. I think that if you have 2.5 million and you're going to get 2.5 from Copeland and you're not going to seriously look at that for the residents of this town, when you have a private donor that's going to give that kind of money to support that kind of a structure and do something good for the community, I think that's wrong. So I am in favor of looking at that in terms of looking at that site, the Governor Stoughton site. I think it would be foolish not to do that. I don't think we should be doing anything until we investigate that. I know it's been a long time, and I get that, and I do sympathize with that. But to leave that kind of money on the table, which, you know, is significant, I think is a problem. And I would also say that in general, I think when people volunteer for committees, I'm always the type of person that thinks hopefully people are doing it for the right reasons. And so I will say that when I got word of what happened, I was a little troubled by that as well. When you have people that are working for the benefit of getting something done for this town, sometimes people are on different sides of issues, but the hope is that people can work together to do the right thing for the community. And I think really strongly that if we don't look at this, that's sort of a slap in the face for this donor and for this community. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Mrs. Zoll? Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Bradley, you may have had your hand up first. So Ms. Bradley, sorry, Mr. Zoll.
I'm really sorry, Mr. Zoll. If you were first,
No,
please
go right
ahead.
ahead.
I
I
turned my
think-
camera off so that people can see my hand.
I think your hand
Mr.
was up.
Zoll?
I think your hand was up first, Aaron. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So I have been the only select board member that has attended all of the Milton Animal League Advisory Committee meetings in the last few months. I've been there, I've listened, and from the beginning and from my heart, I have always wanted this to get done as quickly as possible. Period, end of sentence. I want this off my books so I can move on to do other things. I have said that in no uncertain terms. The other thing that I'd like to say is that we're talking about two totally different things. One is the Milton Animal League Advisory Committee, which is something that is created by the select board, appointed by the select board, and I don't want to say moderated by us, but they have to report back into us, right? Just like any other committee that the select board does, they have to report back into us. It is my understanding that the Milton Animal League is a 501c3, which is a nonprofit that is run separately. It has actually nothing to do with the town of Milton. I've run, I don't know, at this point in my career, I've run 5. Jesus, go look at my LinkedIn. I think it's 5 501c3s. Many of them are multi-million-dollar 501c3s. So in those 501c3s, I had a responsibility to the city of Somerville. I had a responsibility to HUD. I had a responsibility to the state of Massachusetts. I had multiple fiduciary responsibilities, right? But nobody got to actually say who was on my board. And while I think that we can all separate what people are doing here, I think it's very important for the public to understand that the select board, that the people of this town have no authority over the Milton Animal League, which is its own 501c3. They have a right to elect a board. Whether or not we agree with it, that's not our place. I didn't agree with Donald Trump being elected president. Doesn't mean I get to do anything about it. It just means that they have their own system. I think that there are lines here that are being blurred, and it concerns me a lot. I think that, for starters, everybody in the universe here in Milton, that $700,000 that the town of Milton gave to the Milton Animal League, it wasn't free cash. I too thought it was. I was really excited to get that $700,000 back. Nope, it's bonded. So it's not actual real money. There's a lot of intricacies here that we're looking at, and I think that we all need to take a breath. And we need to realize that this has been on our agenda since before I moved to this town, like 10 years. The main point right now is to move this off of our books, to get a new shelter built, to get something that's adequate for the animals, something that's adequate for our town employee, which, by the way, should only be our town employee. That animal officer should only be working for the town to do what's best for the animals. Now, as a smart business person, I want to enter into an agreement with the Milton Animal League that has the best fiduciary responsibility. So I'm looking for an audit of their books. I want to make sure that they are actually fiscally responsible to accomplish what's about to happen. Because I asked Paul, who's the project head honcho guy, I said to him, when this RFP goes out, how many weeks? And he said 5. We have 5 weeks once this goes out. And then we'll have an answer. We will have somebody who can put shovels in the ground. Okay, let's say it's 10 weeks from now. I don't care. There'll be shovels in the ground by the end of this summer. And so I think we all as a board need to stop and think and actually compartmentalize what it is that's our charge and what is the Milton Animal League's charge. Because we don't oversee the Milton Animal League. And those lines have been blurred for the last 10 years. And I think that's part of the problem. The animal control officer works for the town, not the Milton Animal League. She works for the town. And so these little things need to happen, and we need to do what's right for the animals, for the people that work there, which is getting this off our books, which has been my 100% goal all along. So if Paul says that we put that RFP out for Randolph, then we get results in 5 weeks, we need to do that. And I am asking our board to deeply consider, and I understand, Mr. Chair, we are not voting on this tonight, but I am asking folks to deeply consider and understand that we have different roles and there are different things that need to happen here. And our main role right now as the select board, which is how we're meeting right now, is to ensure that the Milton Animal Shelter gets built. Period. End of sentence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Mr. Zoll.
Well, Ms. Bradley covered a lot of what I was going to say. As the new person to this discussion too, I think it would make a lot of sense if we're putting together plans for the Attorney General to consider for the Stoughton land, that we include the plan for the affordable housing in them. I think that's the goal there, because I think if we have sort of an amorphous thing where it's the animal shelter on the site with the idea that affordable housing would be built there, I think we should be getting a yes or no on the sort of whole package of affordable housing plus animal shelter or nothing. But I 100% agree with Ms. Bradley in the need for expediency here. This is a project that's lasted longer than I have been in Milton as well. So I really hope that we can move forward on it in a timely fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Fazol. Other comments or questions? Aaron, your hand is still up. Are you?
No. Sorry,
Okay,
I'm working
all
on
right.
that now.
Okay. So this board asked its advisory committee to consider 2 tracks in April. And seems to me we right now have 2 tracks. We have 1 track where we have a RFP ready to go. The funding for it may be a little shy. And then we have another track where we would go back to the Attorney General's office and see if it's feasible, where we might get an additional $2.5 million. I do have one question for the representative for the Milton Animal League, and that is, have you inquired with the donor's representative whether they would contribute any amount towards the Randolph Ave property?
What I have done from the beginning is to say to them, you understand you've established a condition that I don't have an answer to, and if the answer is no, I would ask you to ask the donor to consider contributing to the shelter anyway at the existing site. I don't have an answer to that. I don't have any indication that condition would disappear. But of course, after this meeting, depending on what you say, I'm going to be reporting back to my contact person simply to say this is where we are. And I will ask that question again, certainly. And if I have an answer and it's that there's some flexibility, I'll certainly let you know right away.
All right. So we have that. We have the two tracks that we've asked our Animal Shelter Advisory Committee to look at. They're going to meet this week and review the cost proposals for the Randolph Ave site. We have a proposed business plan that has been presented to us that we need to come up with rent numbers for on the other track. I do want to say that the relationship that this board and this town has had for 8 years with the Milton Animal League continues. The agreements continue. The Milton Animal League has donated itself upwards of $300,000 already towards this project, and this town is appreciative. This board member is appreciative for that, and so that relationship continues, absent any change. Absent any Solomonic solution by one or more of the members here, it seems to me we may want to continue on the path that we outlined in April, which was to ask our advisory committee to go down both tracks. They've done one on the Governor Stoughton side to prepare the business plan, and we can review that. And then they're going to review the cost estimates on the access road site. So this is on for discussion and discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Bradley, my apologies. So before we I was just going to point out, Ms. Bradley, before you comment, this is on for discussion and update. It's not on for a vote or approval. If one of the members wants to try to get a meeting before the 27th, if we think that time is of essence, and I think everyone thinks it does, we can do that if we think it's useful. Ms. Bradley.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. I just want to be clear in what our next steps are.
Mm-hmm.
So I came into this very late. I didn't realize about this new site, nor was I made aware of the new money until recently this year. I just want to know what the next step is so that we can keep this moving, because I don't want us to get mired down with external things. And so I'm asking you, Mr. Chair, what you think the next step is so that we can, is the next step that the advisory committee that we appointed comes back to us and tells us what their opinion is, whether we go with the Governor Stoughton land or we go with the Randolph Ave land, because it seems to me that it's, at this point, it's an either or. After hearing what Kevin said about the Attorney General's office, after understanding where we're at with all of that, it really does feel to me like we're at an either or. And I'm wondering if in the next few weeks or month, the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee can actually come up with and there's no pressure, guys, no pressure. But I'm wondering if that's the next step. I just want to know what the steps are so we can get this done and off the books. Can we get this done?
It's a fair point. And so I think what our board has done to date is to vote to ask our advisory committee to move down these two tracks. We won't have a vote tonight, but if there is a consensus among the members to suggest, to ask the Milton Animal League or the advisory committee to do something, we could do that. It seems to me without a vote, which we're not on for. If there is a consensus view for doing something different or in addition to, it seems to me the advisory committee has told us, the chair has told us that they're going to review the costs, and that will be some additional information that will come back to us. The Animal League is going to inquire about the potential use of the new donors' funds for the Randolph Ave site. That's additional information that we'll get. I guess the question, Aaron, is there any other additional information that we want, and or is there a consensus that we can give to the advisory committee beyond what we've already said? Mr. Wells.
I just have a historical perspective, especially in light of what Ms. Bradley's comments were. The initial intent to build the new site was always on Governor Stoughton. It only moved, and it did not, it took a detour, as Mrs. McGetrick might remember, in the DPW yard for about 3 years, 4 years, remember?
About 7 other sites
All
are
right, so
considered.
7 years. It was going to be built in the rear of the DPW yard. Then it was going back to Governor Stoughton, and then is the process, this was under John Flynn, was going on. Mr. Clark and I believe it was Mr. Murn found the location off the dump road, and that's how I don't think anyone ever had any idea of how difficult the location would be to build. That's how it became the site. But it was always the original intent of the donors, it was the original intent of the town, it was the original intent of the originals was to build it at the existing site. This is back years ago, and it was, what did you say, I didn't think it was 7 years, but
I think she said
I do
7.
remember it did detour to the back of the DPW.
I think she said
yard.
7 other sites were considered.
Oh, 7 other
Yeah,
sites?
there were 7 other sites. You know, there's one off Randolph Ave that was actually donated for this
Oh, I was gonna say,
purpose,
oh, I
but
know
there's
that, the Animal League, but-
complications. There, we even talked about the barn up at the Blue Hills, which was, you know, there really were 7 other sites, but the town, the select board really wanted to be working with the site that the town owns, if possible, because of this Stoughton issue. And just, I realize I'm speaking out of turn. I just want to mention one other factor nobody has really said clearly is a factor here, and that is that it will cost us more to use the Stoughton site. However, we have a very generous grant that's been offered. But it will cost us more because we have to pay for a lease. We're not talking about a purchase right now. And a fair market value lease will be substantial. The Milton Animal League has actually committed to raise money for that additional cost. But everybody needs to review the funding agreement that the town entered into in 2016 with the Milton Animal League, because that really explains this relationship between the private 501c3 and the town of Milton. The other thing that explains the relationship of the town of Milton is the Milton Animal League's bylaws, which say the purpose of the Milton Animal League is protection of animals, is to work with the town on the care of animals in the town animal shelter. It's a very clear purpose, and it is a public-private kind of, I would describe the organization as a helping organization. It's a bit like a PTO in a school because it's an independent organization. It raises funds, and it gives the funds directly for the care of animals, and it also gives the funds, in this case, directly to the town for the construction of the shelter. So, I mean, those are pretty clear. That's a clear type of relationship. Milton Animal League is well-run. It is currently completing an audit. I'm not sure why that's being asked for. I think it's something that a 501c3 does for its own purposes. Didn't have to because we didn't take in over $1 million. But I just, you know, it's a well-run organization. It may be small, but they're very good people and have been since 1979. Wonderful array of Milton residents. You'll know their names. I'll send you a list of them. You'd be amazed to see who's been involved in this project.
And just for further clarity, and Mr. Daly, just for further clarity, it is this board's responsibility under its agreement from 2015 to select the site subject to the Milton Animal League's consent. And this board, on July 21st, 2015, at the request of the advisory committee, unanimously approved the Randolph Ave site. That was July 21st, 2015. Since then, it's been the Randolph Ave site at the request of the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee as approved by this board. Mr. Daly.
So if I may, so this board specifically told us not to look at the Governor Stoughton site back in 2015. We were told that was not an option. So the other sites that we looked at were not including the Governor Stoughton site. So to give you a little bit of historical background, that's why, one of the reasons why we never even looked at that site. So we have entertained the Governor Stoughton site as a committee since April of 2023. That's it. Just to give you some historical perspective, that's the first time that site has come online for us. So.
And that's the first time that this board asked you to entertain that.
It is, and we serve at your direction, and we had been told not to entertain that site. So thank you for that.
Mr. Wells.
In 2015, what was the proposed cost for the total project in 2015?
Oh, I don't have that kind of memory.
1.5 million.
Yeah, it was much different. Yes, yeah.
Ms. Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to go back to the audit piece of this. I used AANF, which is a well-known accounting office, when I ran a $400,000 organization, right? The fact that they're good people is wonderful. I have good people all the time on boards. Doesn't matter. You need an audit to make sure that your finances are in place. This has nothing to do with the people that are on the board. It has nothing to do with who they are. What it has to do with is our fiduciary responsibility here. We are entering into an MOU with them, and we need to make sure that their accounting is up to date. And with all due respect, Ms. McKentrick, I'm a little bit taken aback that you think it's okay that this organization has never had an audit. I've run multiple 501c3s and 501c4s and PACs and all of that stuff. I had an audit every year, because that's what's important, to make sure that there is honesty and people can buy into what it is that you're doing. Right now, there has never once been an audit for the Milton Animal League, which is a 501c3. So you're asking the town of Milton to just accept it because they're good people. Well, a lot of people think that people are good people, and they're not. And they do things that aren't good. So it's really in the Milton Animal League's best interest to have an audit. So until that happens, I'm going to be very suspicious about what's going on with the Milton Animal League's finances. And not suspicious in a bad way, just suspicious because I should be, because I'm a educated citizen of this country, just like we should be suspicious of everything. I just want to say that's not an okay excuse to just say they're good people. So thank you so much.
That was not an excuse. We are currently doing an audit. End of story.
Okay.
I don't want to discuss it. This is.
All right, we're getting a little.
There's no problem. This really shouldn't be before the Board of Selectmen, but for your information, they're currently completing an audit.
Okay.
Select
Thank you.
board, and that's great. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see it.
All right. So, Mr. Zoll?
It did sound like there was a question about whether we would be in favor of putting an RFP out, though, for the Randolph Ave site to provide more information about what the costs of that site were. And I don't know if that's something we would want to consider now, or if we should consider that at our next meeting.
Seems to me that if there's a consensus, that we could ask the advisory committee to do that, to prepare that, if there's a consensus. If not, then it's something we should have a vote on. So is there a consensus that we should do that, or do we want to put it off for an actual vote?
I think more information is a good idea if it doesn't damage the reputation of the town, which it sounds like it may, but I think it would be good to have that additional cost information.
Other members? I'm not getting the sense of a consensus here. So absent a consensus. Ms. Bradley, do you want to be heard on this? Or I don't think we have a consensus on this. So we'll put this on. Oh, Ms. Bradley.
No, I'm sorry. I was trying to lower my hand.
Great. Okay.
Nope.
So absent a consensus on that, we'll move forward the way we have. It will be on our agenda again, and we'll have it on for a vote the next time. And thank you all. I appreciate it. The town appreciates all the work you're doing. We're all trying to get to the same end here. Some people have a little different idea how to get there, but everybody's interested in getting to the end game, and I'm confident that with all the work that's going into it and all the good work that's going in, that we will get to the end game here. So thank you all, and we'll see you again. And actually, I don't know if we don't get away from this issue, because if there's no objection, we will recess because this issue is now topical for the Governor Stoughton trustees. We'll recess from the select board, and we will, if there's no objection, we will adjourn our meeting of the Governor Stoughton trustees.
So I'll make a motion to recess the select board meeting.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells? Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll is yes. All right, so we are in recess of the select board, so I'll call to order the Governor Stoughton, meetings of the Governor Stoughton's Trust. We have on here public comment. I don't know that we typically have public comment for the Governor Stoughton trustees, but we have it here. Is there any public comment for the Governor Stoughton trustees? Going once, going twice, and gone. I don't see anyone coming on for public comment on that. Item 3 is discussion approval of the town farm site. We have 3 subparts to this. First, update of the discussion of the Attorney General's public charity discussion with the Attorney General's Public Charities Division. I think we've already had that update, unless the trustees would like to have any further discussion about our update on that discussion with the Attorney General's office. And we still have Mr. Freitag with us if any of the trustees would like to ask any questions or make any comments about that. Seeing none. Item 3B is the Affordable Housing Draft RFP from the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, and I believe we have Ms. Kramer here, and from the Affordable Housing Trust. And do you intend to help us with this evening, Ms. Kramer?
If you'd like me to.
Well, I think you can certainly add value because on this, and you can certainly frame it for us to the extent that maybe Mr. I don't know if Mr. Milano wants to initially frame it and then hand it off to Ms. Kramer. Or?
No, we received this back from the Mass Housing Partnership over the last couple of weeks. The Affordable Housing Trust did take a look at it, added some additional comments and questions, and replied to some comments and questions from Mass Housing Partnership. I'll note that Tom Callahan and Tim Zerwinski are also here.
Oh, please. Yeah,
so
let's
I will
have
have
them
join us in case there are additional questions behind yourself.
Great.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Wells. Yes, we're moving. We're moving.
Moving along.
We're moving along. We're moving along.
No, that was not for you.
Of course not.
It's for me.
Of course not.
It was for me.
My name is Julie Kramer. I live in Frothingham Street. I am currently the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust, and I have, along with the other members of the Affordable Housing Trust, have engaged on trying to get an RFP, a request for proposal, pulled together for the Governor Stoughton site. And there's been a few back and forths with the Governor Stoughton Trust and the Affordable Housing Trust on a document that had been initially created by MHP, Massachusetts Housing Partnership, for just that, to issue an RFP for the development of affordable housing on the site, to re-establish housing on the site as it once had served for housing. So I can answer any of the questions you might have on the document itself, or talk a little bit about the RFP process and why it's important to have a document worked on and agreed to by the town so that, you know, our direction is clear to potential bidders.
Why don't we have comments or questions from the members on the document or on the process at this point?
1 second, I'll come back. I'm trying to get back to the document because I have some questions here.
Great.
I looked at it today and I know I got it.
I have a hard copy, Rich, if you want. You want a hard copy?
No, I was looking at the document of the design that we got today. Am I correct?
It looks like this. It says RFP on the top.
This is very common for towns to issue these RFPs for affordable housing. I work for an organization that has responded to probably 40 RFPs in the last 15 years for affordable housing opportunities, and we've probably built 20 from those responses. So it's a very common place, and MHP has authored most of them. So it's a technical document.
Ms. Musto.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could, I have it printed up here, but for people that are at home, can you walk through a little bit of this in terms of what is the definition of affordable housing, what you're talking about, the number of units and so forth, buildings, for people that are watching?
Sure. So
Thank you.
that's obviously not up to the Affordable Housing Trust to make decisions
No, but what's
on
in the
that.
document? Yeah.
So what the document typically lays out is it uses information that is gathered from the town, from the select board, from the Governor Stoughton Trust, and very much from our housing production plan, which is something that was authored a few years ago about the need for affordable housing in the town, where the affordable housing might go, what it might look like, what affordability levels are needed in the town. So if you read the housing production plan, you can get a real sense of the work that was done to put that document together. So that's, they take clues from us and they create this RFP. And what it essentially says is, here's the site. Here are some studies that might have been done for the site, how it might look if there were one building, two buildings, three buildings, what level of affordability the Governor Stoughton Trust might support. And it's, like I said, a very technical document. It lays out the process by which they have to deliver the responses on a timely basis with the information that's required for the RFP. And typically the information the RFP is looking for is some sort of site planning, the number of units, the unit mix, meaning are they 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, the affordability mix. Is it going to be all 60% AMI, area mean income, a term that's used in affordable housing? Are you going to have market rate units? Are you going to have a mix? What's that mix going to look like? And then in the back of the document, you'll see there's a matrix that is developed, again, in partnership with the town, that says, we think a response that contains 100% affordable housing would get the highest mark, and something that had less than that might get a lower mark. And so you actually form a committee that reviews the proposals, and you grade them. You say, okay, this one stands out because it has 100 out of 100, and this one is second because it has 80 out of 100. And you actually, go through each and every proposal to determine what best meets the guidance given in the RFP. So that's how it's done, and that's how it's done, all over the state.
Ms. Musto.
Thank you. My understanding from previously when you had come in terms of affordable housing, you had mentioned that the most you could do in a split for town residents, percentage-wise, would be a maximum of 70% for Milton residents, and 30% would not be for Milton residents. So I think that that brings
And
up.
can I clarify just one thing?
Sure.
You're right about the 70% preference, but the other 30 can be local or non-local. So it's not as though only 70%, right? It's opened, that is an open pool, meaning it's for both folks who live in our town or work in our town or, want to live in our town but can't afford to. So it's not that clear of a definition.
And in the document, it looked like it was 80% AMI with some down to 50% when I looked through that. Is that what you're looking at with this document?
That was a starting point. So it doesn't mean that that's the only thing a responder would put in their proposal, right? Someone might go do no 80% units and do primarily 60% units. It all depends on the proposer. But that's guidance. It's guidance from the town, right? We have to say, this is what we want, right? We have to make that clear in the document.
I would also say that it has to meet the terms of the trust as far as being a trustee on the Governor Stoughton Trust. It has to be for the poor of Milton according to what is in the trust. So that is another point.
And that is why the AG's office asked for a plan, just like he asked for a business plan, right? for the animal shelter. They want to know what the town feels is serving the poor of the town. I mean, does someone who can't afford a $700,000 3-bedroom, 1-bath home, are they the poor of Milton? That's for you folks to decide, right?
Do you know there's a $700,000 3-bath home in Milton
Right.
available right now?
I don't know. Maybe we can find one. If we find one, we're all going to buy it.
But I think it's a great point about the community, though, because, we do have folks who are teachers in this town or work in the public sector who would love to live here and who can't. And I wouldn't consider them any less members of our community because they're interfacing with our kids, with our elderly, with other folks. So I think that's a great point. But I do like I do like having that 70% figure. So just a quick question about the attachment A, which I think is the matrix question. So there's this unacceptable, advantageous, and highly advantageous categories. So if one of these proposals falls in the unacceptable, then that just means straight out not considered, or because unacceptable to me means we won't accept it, right? But does it just mean that it puts them at a disadvantage?
It puts them in a disadvantage, and most folks responding would make sure they're not totally unacceptable, right? They're not going to say, we think it should be luxury condos. They're going to.
But they might have one that could fall in unacceptable.
They might, and certainly, these. It's a balancing act. I mean, I respond to a lot of these. We build affordable housing, so it's not hard for us to, visualize how it would look, what it would feel like, how it would be managed, how it would be operated. But you might have a responder who says, you know what, I don't mind getting one disadvantage, right? Or, but typically you don't really see that.
That's okay. That's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify around the language.
Yeah.
Just a second, Ms. Wells. Oh, sorry. Just a second, Ms. Wells. Were you finished, Ms. Musto?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's
Sorry.
okay.
No, please.
The other question I actually had was, and we had talked about this as well, is we have a lot of older people in town that are having a lot of problems staying in this town, and they have lived in the town and put into this town a lot. And I know that some places have housing for that, and so I know that, for instance, Winter Valley's putting up some units now, but the amount of people that are waiting for affordability that are older residents in this town that are selling their homes for younger families is huge. I mean, if you talk with anybody at the senior center, they will tell you that. So I would like to know if that has been looked at in terms of doing, a development, if we're going to develop, that's 100% affordable for older residents in our town.
So, I'll respond to you more as a practitioner. There are folks who will respond to this as elderly housing, right? Because it's a little easier, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but most towns accept elderly affordable housing, right? That's just the truth of the matter. We, as a town, have elderly affordable housing. We don't really have any family affordable housing. We have vouchers that we can give out. So, you will see a lot of folks respond with a purely elderly. I'm telling you because I know, they're my competitors. you will see that. And that may be what you folks want. And I don't think in that chart it says that's disadvantageous, right? I don't think that chart clarifies that it has to be family or it has to be 2 or 3 bedroom. So you will definitely get responses. And I think you have to decide whether that you feel that's a better use of that site. Affordable housing is affordable housing, right? An SHI unit counts the same as an elderly unit as a family unit. Myself, I think we need family housing here, guys, but the Governor Stoughton Trust has to make that decision. And I do see a lot of elderly folks who are in search of housing, or single folks or 55 and over folks who, sell their house and have nowhere to live in this town. So I do see that, absolutely.
Ms. Musto.
I would just say, I think the bigger question for us to grapple with is, as trustees, what we think is best. So in general, I think that's something we have to really consider, because we have a fiduciary responsibility and we have to meet the terms of the trust. And so I think sometimes you just have to step back and really look at that too, because I think, we assume that the town owns the land. It's the trustees that own the land. And so it's confusing for a lot of people because they think, oh, it's town-owned land. Technically, it's the trust, and as trustees, we oversee that. So I think sometimes there may be some competing interests in a lot of this as well. So, thank you.
I see we have Mr. Zawinski, Mr. Callahan, and Ms. Bradley, but Mr. Wells, I think, was first, so.
I say we stay with this.
What's that? Oh.
I say we stay. So, we've talked about this a million times, so I'm gonna go as quick as I can. From my perspective here now, as long as I will say to Ms. Musto's point, the number one thing on this board that people will come to you about is over 55, widows, someone dies. So my one question there is, could it be mixed? Could it be some family and some, I thought I saw some, because
Sure.
I do
Absolutely.
believe that, and I'm going back to like a sketch you brought us, a prior board, like a long time ago. It was like different buildings, kind of, something similar, did to either the Cape or on Concord. It almost looked like a New England farm.
Yep.
Am I right? Am I going
Yep.
down the right? Okay. So could we potentially put it out that would be mixed, would have some over 55 and some family, or some new startups and some over 50? Could it be that?
Absolutely. There's
Okay.
nothing to prohibit that other than whatever the responder decides is the best fit. And, 1 bedrooms are cheaper to build than
Yeah.
2 or 3 bedrooms. So, I guess I'm not trying to dissuade you from saying we want an all elderly building, because if that's what you want, that's what you want. But I will tell you, you will get folks that respond.
Over 55.
Over 50, over 55 is a little harder because there is definitely more fair housing compliance that goes with over 55. So it's a little harder, right? But you probably will get folks who respond all elderly.
Okay, second question. So the 70-30 to me is the $1 million question, because not from your world, because this piece of property, unlike anything else, falls under the Governor Stoughton Trust, with a magical sentence is for the poor of Milton. And Mr. Zul, the chair knows it. So how do we, how do you take people in a winter, that 30%, how do we get over that?
I don't
'Cause I don't
think
know how
you
we
get
define
over it. I think you grow as a committee and recognize that fair housing didn't exist back then. And you realize that the town looked different back then. I mean, do we trace it back to the original town borders? We just have to grow as a town, guys. We have to stop shutting our door.
I hear
mean,
you.
we're
I
in
hear
a tough spot.
I hear
We
you.
have an SHI that has been at the lowest levels forever. And yes, we need an animal shelter. We've been trying to build an animal shelter for years. How long have we been trying to build affordable housing? There was housing up there. Did anyone check when they moved in if they were from Milton? we can't play this both ways, guys.
Yeah, so
we
for
really
years-
have to think about this and recognize that the poor that's not a term that's used anymore, right? It's not. Right?
I hear you,
I
Passion.
have a son that just graduated college. Is he poor? He hasn't started his job yet. Is he poor? Like, let's not use that term.
I know you don't, but the Attorney General does, so
Well,
that's.
no, if you said, we think that the poor is 80% AMI, 60% AMI, whatever you decide, that's what the Attorney General will respond to, not
I
the
get that.
poor
I'm not-
is.
I have no problem with that. I understand that. And historically, to Mr. Zoll's point, those buildings, when they were rented to new town employees. That's who lived there.
Right.
But the dilemma, I mean, my colleagues can tell me, I'm just asking what I think is really the $1 million question. Every AG, well, people, Joanna.
It was a
Mary,
$5 million
they all talk-
question.
They all keep going
Because
to
we
that.
sold it for $5 million, so it's a $5 million question,
Right, it's a $5 million question.
right?
But I think we have to answer it. So that's, you've, I thought, I'm good. You know where I'm going.
I know where you're going, and I know it's hard.
It is,
And
it's hard.
You guys have to make that decision.
You do.
Nobody can make that decision except the
But where's
five
the
of
Attorney
you.
General?
No, I don't think, I think we got the Attorney General over the fact that we're selling it for luxury housing. So I think we can get the Attorney General over, we're building it for 80% AMI
Is your
residents.
proposal, just remind me, is this one gonna sell or lease or either or, whichever we choose?
It's whatever you choose.
That's what I thought, okay.
So I'm going to ask Mr. Zawinski and Mr. Callahan to hold their thoughts, maybe jot them down so they don't forget, because Ms. Bradley had her hand up, and I don't want to lose that.
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say it seems very, I'm not there, so I can't feel the mood in the room, but it feels like it's very defensive and very, that the town's not for affordable housing, and I don't think that anybody has said that. Do I think that there are multiple places in our town that is for 55 plus? 100%. I go there every month. I go there. I see all of them. Are there people that are being forced out of their homes? Yes. We are not unique. It is a statewide issue. We can't fix it in Milton, honestly. I don't think we can. But I just want everybody to take a deep breath right now, because I'm in DC and I can feel the tension over here. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, well, we'll try to lighten things up here in the room. And the best person to do that, I think, would be Mr. Zawinski.
Let's put him on a timer, please, Mr. Chair, please.
I love him. Go Tim.
You wanna let him keep going?
I wish I had a line queued up.
Just try
thank
to
you,
keep-
Mr.
just
Chair,
try to
Tim
keep up with me,
Director of
Tim.
Planning and Community Development. I just wanted to add a little bit of context to the conversation about age-restricted housing. I think that Julie said a lot of things, and I think she's right that, irrespective of what the parameters of the RFP, say, there's a likelihood that you'll get an age-restricted respondent, and then it just becomes, do they fit the matrix of responsiveness that the trustees put in their RFP. One thing that I will say, though, is that when it comes to actually getting affordable units approved for the subsidized housing inventory, which is kind of a parallel goal to actually housing people. If we're going to do it, we want to make sure that we get credit for it. The Commonwealth's guidelines on the local initiative program, which is the program by which sort of non-40B housing gets approved for subsidized housing inventory. The hurdle for age-restricted housing is just a little bit higher than family housing. I think the Commonwealth, through the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, formerly DHCD, is really interested in affordable projects providing family housing. That's why there's a requirement of all 40B projects that a certain percentage of those units are 3 or more bedrooms. And one thing that they put in in their guidelines, and this is in this sort of the section on consistency with local housing needs, is at the discretion of, it used to be DHCD, approval of these units can be withheld if the proposed age-restricted units, in context with the municipality's other recent housing efforts are unresponsive to needs for family housing. So, if and when, this RFP goes out, and if and when project gets selected, we may be in a different sort of situation depending on, whether certain 40Bs get approved. All of that is just to say that, the Commonwealth is going to be looking at anything that we do through the lens of what are you doing to provide affordable family housing? And if we can't demonstrate that we've taken proactive efforts in that regard, they're going to look a little bit more strictly at our attempts to approve an age-restricted project. This is something that's in the discourse right now. It's in the discourse around MBTA community zoning. There was an editorial in the Globe yesterday about, zoning in the Boston suburbs is stacked against families with children, kind of calling out, towns throughout the Commonwealth for, really only looking at affordable, at multifamily housing in an age-restricted kind of context. And so, it's something that's on everyone's mind. Everyone is giving it a lot of scrutiny. And so I think, just as you're putting together the parameters of the RFP, I think what Julie said is correct, that there's a lot of developers that are interested in building this type of housing and will respond regardless of what the parameters of the RFP are. But I think you're going to want to make them broad enough that you're attracting a wide variety of different types of developers, of different types of housing, because if you look through the housing production plan, the need for affordable housing is acute at every price point, at every tenure type, at every size of unit in the town of Milton. And so, I think the RFP should reflect that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zerwinski. Mr. Callahan, do you have some unicorns and show ponies for us?
Not really, but I just want to echo what Tim and Julie were saying and throw another possible slight monkey wrench. And I do,
Did you have
Select
to?
Board Member Wells, talked about a mixed age development, which I think, as Julie said, I agree with, that is definitely possible. But going to the original question from Ms. Musto, the typical, and I'm sure there would be exceptions to this, but the typical lower income Milton senior is a homeowner, just because most of us in Milton are homeowners. And so they may be low income, but they might sort of apply with a windfall of assets, right? The typical senior is going to sell their home, and they might be living on a $15,000 income, but they might just got $1 million, asset. So all I'm saying, and I'm certainly not a lawyer, is the AG may have something to say about that if we're renting to low income seniors who are asset rich, that may not meet the definition of the poor of Milton either. So it's just another consideration as we sort of move forward with this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Other comments or questions? Ms. Musto.
Sure, just a couple of comments. One, to Mr. Callahan's point, when I was talking with people at the senior center, it's not always that residents have these homes and they're selling them. They might be, they might have already switched them into their kids' names or whatever else. And so they're actual assets. I think we're assuming that could be the situation. But from what I'm hearing on the front line, that's not what's true. So I think there are probably situations to what Mr. Callahan said, but not always. And the other comment I would like to say is nobody here is saying, at least from what I can hear and what Ms. Bradley said, nobody's saying we don't want affordable housing in this town. So I think, but what our job is what's right for that property as Governor Stoughton trustee. So, there are other opportunities in town for affordable housing as well, whether it's buying, homes or pieces of land and buildings. So there are other opportunities. This is a different situation. I think the other thing we need to think about as trustees is, at this point, is this something that we need to do on that land? And so to really think about that. And I know that you were saying, oh, the poor of Milton, trying to make it a different definition. And yes, it's from the 1700s, this trust and will and so forth, but we do have to respect that. And so, we can't just throw that away and try to give our interpretation of what, today might be. We have to look at, we have to look at what today would be for the poor, but you know what I'm saying, is that we can't just throw that out the window and say, okay, well, that doesn't mean anything. Well, it does mean something. It's why people have been so careful as trustees along the way, and I think that's important, because this is the remaining section of land that's there. Do we develop it? Do we not? I think these are all bigger questions, because once it's gone, it's gone. And, this is something that, is, when we have the money in the bank right now, the interest is used every day for people that need it, for people that need heat or, air conditioning or, food, medicine. These are all really important things. And I'm proud as a trustee member that we are able to provide that to this community. And I think that's very important, that we can't lose sight of that. So, if we're going to start, we have a decent situation now where we have a good chunk of money that's generating, interest, and we're using that money in a very positive manner. And so I think we have to think about, number one, do we need to build on this property? And if we do, we really need to adhere to what the intention was of that trust. And I think, as I said, I think sometimes as a trustee, maybe we're coming in conflict as being a member of the select board. And so I think those can be conflicting avenues as well.
Yep.
So.
And the Milton Residence Fund is amazing. They do amazing work. I can't say enough good things about what they do and how they do it, but that doesn't preclude us from building housing, which would be an asset to our town. So I completely agree with you. That $5 million is doing amazing things, especially during the pandemic, when more of us had food insecurity, needed a helping hand. So I'm not trying to dismiss that at all. And I'm not trying to dismiss the fact that we're not doing enough for affordable housing. It is a tough road to hoe. And we have an opportunity to do it. And it was land granted to us to do it. And that's what I'm saying.
So I saw an indication from Mr. Zoll, but I think Mr. Wells and also Ms. Bradley too. So Mr. Wells, I'm going to go Mr. Wells, Mr. Zoll, and Ms. Bradley, if that's okay with Ms. Bradley.
So just to, Tim, you can weigh in on this. So to Tom's point and to Tim's point, so I do believe 648 Kent, 652 Kent, 711 Randolph, the Falcone Cochran Project, 16 Amor, and 934 Brush are all family affordable housing projects, correct? Am I right? The Ice House being the last one that is condos. I know they're not still, but they're on the.
I don't know that for fact.
I think they all are.
They could have 2 bedrooms.
Yes.
They could have 1 bedrooms.
And some have 3s.
And some have 3s because they're 40Bs, so they need to have 3s. So yeah, they're not built yet, but yeah. Those are.
So I just want to make that point. We are going down. We have spent a lot of time, Mr. Zulus knows, with Betty, we spent a lot. So I do like the idea of the mixed. And just to quickly, to Mr. Callahan's point, I do know at Winter, which is one of the ones where people who are, as you described, the sole widow are trying to, they take you at market rate. Depending on how much money you have, it depends on how much you pay. So if you're really poor, you pay a lesser rate versus, have more money, you pay a more of what they call market rate. And just the last point, Mr. Chair, is the last affordable thing that we built, the last senior residence we built in this town, which is the largest, which is Fuller, And the only way to get in that is to have a significant piece. There is no affordable aspect. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, Julie, to fuller. You could have a significant piece of money to get in there. And so that's why I do like, I'm gonna continue to advocate that. I'd like to at least see it mixed, but we need, because none of this addresses it. And even the Winter Valley project is only another 30 units. It's not a lot. So that's it. Spoken up.
Fuller does have vouchers units.
Yeah. Not a
So
lot.
there are some,
Yeah, not a
but they,
little.
you know, they,
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Mr. Zoll, and then Ms. Bradley.
So, no, that's no problem at all. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick thoughts about this. So I take very well Ms. Musto's point about the $5 million fund. I think that it's fantastic, the work that it's been doing. I see this, we've got a lot of different problems that we're dealing with as a town. Affordable housing is one of them. And so there's a lot of different ways to look at that. I think, leaving land fallow or building more luxury condos is not really, for me, I think the right solution for the remaining parcel here. I think we've been assured here that the RFP that we're being asked to look at is going to come back with affordable housing for seniors, most likely, in some of those proposals. So I think we don't really need to worry that we won't be seeing that. That's the assurance here. And I think leaving an RFP as broad as possible for developers to look at and make their considerations makes a lot of sense. The 40B housing that we've had here has been imposed upon us by developers because of Milton's continual failure to develop affordable housing. And I don't think that it's really a mark of success that we're in a position where developers are coming in and putting things up because we have failed to act. So, and I just want to kind of come up with my final thought here is when we think about what benefits the poor of Milton, as somebody who's spent my entire career working in the nonprofit space, we often have to figure out how do we get something accomplished? And sometimes the way that we get things accomplished is that we get 70% of what we need, and then in return, somebody else is getting 30% of what they need. And it's very, very difficult to ever find a situation where you're going to sort of 100% benefit everybody. I would argue that the luxury condos that were built, certainly came at a cost to the town. I'm not sure that, in terms of the market value or in terms of the climate impact of all of the housing that was developed. Was it a net gain for the poor of Milton? Yes, because now we have these funds that are benefiting us, but you could certainly make the argument that it wasn't a 100% win for us either. So for all of those reasons, I'm really encouraged by this RFP process. I'm encouraged the fact that we're going to be able to come back and look and see what folks are coming up with ideas for this site, and I'm in favor of it. So that's the end of my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Zoll. Ms. Bradley.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I'm pushing all the buttons right now. Okay. So I'm coming at this that we have to remember that we have a different hat on right now. We have the Governor Stoughton Trust hat on right now. And I'm thinking back, I've been reading, actually, funny enough, because I'm got nothing but free time. I've been reading about how things were when he was governor, which was interesting. But I don't think he was checking anybody's, ID or anything when he let them up on the poor farm to actually farm and live there. So I want us just to take a minute and remember that we're here as the Stoughton trustees. We are not here to help all these other groups. We're here as the trustees. And so when I look back, and I've read a lot of what was been written, again, lots of free time, can't wait for school to start. They wanted to basically help as many people as possible. So they wanted to make the biggest impact as possible. So for me, when I look at what the will is and what the will was back then, it's to help the greatest population possible. So for me, I really, Julie, am thankful for all that you have put forth. I hope we can put more units up there now that we are thinking of not putting an animal shelter over there. Let's rack it up. And I think we need to stop and think about, I trust me, I get the seniors. I'm in their homes every day. I'm the only person on this board that is in their homes on a daily basis and have hundreds of clients here in Milton. And I can tell you that many of them are finding places in Winter Valley. And I can tell you that many of them are sitting on their homes waiting for their children to receive their homes. I think that, we're not a unicorn, unfortunately. I know we like to think we are, but we are not a unicorn here. There are hundreds of towns across the Commonwealth that have seniors that are sitting in their homes trying to figure out what the next step is. What we have to do as Governor Stoughton trustees is figure out what is the best for our land. And in what I've read and what I've been doing my due diligence of lately, it's to make sure that we put as many people as possible on that land. And I don't know how to say that in a nicer way. And I think that we all need to look at ourselves and figure out why it is that we wouldn't want to put as many of the poor on there. And you can say the poor is 300%, I don't know, 200%. You can say whatever it is of the federal median. That's not for me to figure out. But shouldn't we want to put so many people up there so that they can enjoy and live the way that all of us live? Like this just sounds so ridiculous to me that we should just, as Governor Stoughton trustees, want to have as many people as possible living on that land because that's what he wanted. So as we all take those hats off and go back into our select board mode, I just hope that we remember that the will is to make it be for the poor. And I don't care how y'all define it. I don't. But I think that we need to expand the way that we're looking at it right now and see what the biggest bang for our buck is. So that's where I stand. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. I'm going to try to embody Ms. Bradley just for a minute and talk about process. So we have an RFP with commentary on it, a draft RFP with commentary on it. My memory is that the idea was that this would be something we would present to the Attorney General's office as a potential, as a possibility. Was that the idea of this? I thought that was the idea of this. So if that is the idea, the question is, how do we complete it? There are decisions that these trustees will have to make in order to complete it. And so the question is how the best way to do that is. And I think it would be helpful if someone from the Affordable Housing Trust could help us through the questions, the decision points, because we have decision points that we'll have to reach. And so.
Are you proposing to do this tonight?
No.
Okay.
No. I'm proposing. I'm proposing that we have a plan after tonight, and that is, I think we need to. If the Affordable Housing Trust could provide the decision points to us for this RFP, so that the plan is make the decisions to populate the RFP, and then determine whether we want to present it to the Attorney General's office as a possibility. Is that a possible path here?
Yep, and we have provided comments already, but
Yep.
we can roll them up into a very concise.
I think that would be helpful.
for sure.
I think if we just had a list and then we can just tick them off that way. So that'd be helpful. Okay, great. Any other comments or questions from the members? Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to Mr. Zawinski and Mr. Callahan as well. Pardon me. All right, item 3C, animal shelter. Now with our hats as Governor Stoughton trustees, thinking about the Port Milton project update, site selection, business plan per request of the Attorney General's Office, Public Charities Division. Is there anything further to discuss on this? Mr. Wells.
I think you need to know what a fair market rent should be. I think that's the big question that has to be answered. And in reading that,
Yep.
and Attorney Phillips actually made that comment to me when I spoke to her, like, I think we need to know that.
It's a very good point. So then the question is, how do we determine that?
Board of Assessors. Same way we do with all the other properties.
So,
yeah.
so maybe we can charge Mr. Milano with reaching out to the Board of Assessors.
Actually,
And-
the town has said that,
and-
I don't even know.
Yeah, the town appraiser, and determining what a fair market rate could be.
Yeah,
So-
we can, I can consult with them and circle back with you by the 27th.
Okay, okay. Any other comments or questions on the animal shelter piece of this from the Governor Stoughton side? I guess one thing feeds into another, so. All right, item 4, discussion approval of the minutes of April 11th, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of April 11, 2023.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll?
Abstain.
Mr. Zulus, yes. Very good, Mr. Zoll. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the Governor Stoughton trustees.
So moved.
Motion's been
Second.
made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus, yes. We are adjourned, and we are returning now to our Select Board meeting. Returning to our Select Board meeting, item 7, Select Board goals and objectives. We have a draft, we have a draft that was resulted from our meeting on June 3rd of our goals and objectives, and the chair did his best to incorporate the suggestions and writings, but certainly any other thoughts or comments on that we can take up. So the floor is open on goals and objectives. Let's see.
You want a motion to approve?
Well, if that's what
I'll make a
people want to
motion
do.
approve
Yes.
the goals and objectives, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Second.
All right. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Ms. Musto,
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Mr. Zoll.
Yes.
And Mr. Zulish, yes. I'm getting a rhythm now on this. All right.
And
Item
you
8.
know where I'm going now.
Item-
Shifting over again. So
Item
let's go.
Item 8, town administrators, goals and objectives. We have a draft that was prepared as a result of our June 3rd, 2023 meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the town administrator's goals and objectives.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Ms. Musto,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Zoll.
Yes.
Mr. Zulish, yes. Okay. Item 9, fall town meeting dates. We had some feedback. Well, I'm gonna go to Mr. Milano, because we had some feedback from the town clerk and the town moderator on town meeting dates.
So the main thing that we're tracking for the fall town meeting would be a potential discussion about the MBTA Communities Act zoning. And with the fall town meeting currently scheduled to be the 4th Monday in October, we were looking at whether it made sense to push that back to December to give that an even longer runway before it gets to the town meeting level, to give the planning department, planning board, the additional time that they might be able to use to engage with the public. And then also there will be certainly a need for a warrant committee level deliberations before that town meeting. We reached out to both the town clerk, town moderator about availability in December. December 4th, which is that first Monday, just like we had in 2022, they are available that day to commence a fall town meeting, if that's the select board's interest.
And I will only add to that, there is a benefit to doing it in December, to the extent, as we have in the past few years, have additional money to appropriate that comes to our attention.
So why don't we just do that? So let's just do it now. Let's go for December instead of October. Everybody knows?
Yep.
You want a motion, or you just want to?
So I think it'd be helpful to have a motion to approve the changing the.
Motion it, Richard.
I'll make a motion to approve the change of the fall town meeting from October to December with a date to be determined.
It's actually, if we could change it from October 30th which is the,
All right,
which
October
is
30th to when
to December 4th.
All right, December 4th, that's it.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Zulish, yes. Item 10, discussion approval applications to the Community Preservation
That's all.
Committee. Mr. Milano?
Sure, thank you. I submitted 2 applications to CPA for funding. The first was to improve the basketball court located outside of Town Hall, across from where we are presently, and next to the fire department. That court it's been in long need of an overhaul. So we plugged in a cost estimate based on the work that's being done over at Andrews this coming summer. To basically refurbish that top to bottom, start over with the court, new hoops, maybe some amenities, a couple benches, and just improve the overall landscaping. I plugged in a dollar amount of $75,000. It's being reviewed now for eligibility. Before it progresses, just wanted to check in with this board to make sure it was acceptable to you folks, and thank to Mr. Zulus for the idea and suggestion on doing so.
A motion on this?
I think so. I think we,
I'll make a motion to approve the application for $75,000 of CPA for upgrade. I'm gonna call it Ash Street Playground, but I know that's not what it's really called, but the playground on Walnut Street at the corner of Clap. How's that?
Works.
I'll second.
motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Zulish, yes. And then we have a second.
Yes, the second one is the bench pergola at Manning Park in East Milton. I did leave the funding request in this one blank because it's such a big number and I wanted to engage with the select board before doing that. The total project cost from the designers that they had done it was $750,000. Representative Driscoll did secure an earmark of $100,000 in the fiscal 23 state budget. We reached out to his office to see if that money could be carried forward to a future fiscal year, which they do allow from time to time. But that does leave, as Mr. Wells mentioned earlier, a pretty significant delta between expected cost and money available. So before pushing this forward with the CPA, wanted to check in with the select board in terms of a dollar amount that it might be interested in requesting, if it's interested in pushing this project forward.
Mr. Wells?
So I had talked briefly with both Chase and Rob, the outgoing chair, just a little bit of a number of 250, and then looking at some capital and some private as well to combine it to cover the whole thing. We're actually, Rep. Driscoll is 200,000. We used 100,000 to design it and to set the platform and stuff was already done. It has, and the second 100 is hopefully can be encumbered. So I do know there's interest too from the chamber, and so that's the number I would propose would be 250, and then we go from there.
Any other comments?
Is
Ms.
that all right with
Musto?
you, Nick? Is that enough for you? I think that's the number. That's a reasonable number.
Yeah, I think the goal is to try to pull it together from sources as best as we can, right?
I
Ms.
just
Musto?
thank you. I just had a quick question. Did we have any idea when this first was proposed, the cost of this?
I
With
can't
the
speak to
pergola?
that, sorry.
It was originally
Yeah.
included in the at the 25% down. It was
Yeah.
at the request of the community. It was. I'm gonna turn it off, John. It's time for me to go home. I'll go. I think there'll be a lot of happy people if I do. It was originally included in the proposal at the 25%. It was one of the things that had been asked for so much there, and just costs. It's just gone through the roof. Like we were at 250, then we were at 450, then 650, and now 750. So, yeah. So they to finish the project, as you know, Mr. Zulus, we had to omit it, and it was our goal then to try and raise the money. That's how Rep. Driscoll first got involved.
All right, thank you.
Roxanne, it was one of the first things that you and I voted on when we became select board members.
Yeah, the design.
Well, I remember we did the
was the pergola,
design.
yeah.
But I was just thinking the cost. I don't remember the cost being that high.
I don't either.
Yeah.
No, I completely concur with
Yeah.
you. I don't remember it being that high either, but I remember that this was one of the first things we voted on.
Right. Okay.
Ms. Bradley? Oh, were you
I'm all
finished?
set.
Yeah.
Thank
No,
you.
I got nothing else. Sorry,
Okay.
let me.
All right, so
put
we
things
have a
down.
proposal to have the application to the CPC for the pergola in the amount of $250,000. Do we want to make that in the form of a motion?
I'll make that as a motion, Mr. Chair.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Zulish, yes. Item 11, discussion approval, committee appointments, reappointments. The Climate Action Planning Committee, we have an appointment from the school committee for their designee, and then we have a designee that we can appoint, and the town administrator has a designee to appoint, and then we will have a full committee. So,
This is, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
this is the full committee right here from
no,
I through, no?
no, what you're seeing in your list are the applicants. Those are the applicants. So,
How many are
and-
we appointing?
We have one more appointment, and our designee, unless one of us wants to serve on it, and then the town administrator has a designee as well.
We don't, none of these are on it now.
That's correct. And Ms. Troy has been appointed as the school committee designee, so I don't think we would question that. That's my own view.
Then, Mr. Chair, we should ask the town administrator whom he would like to appoint.
Sure. I would recommend to the board Ms. Stephanidakis, if I'm pronouncing that right, and I'm probably not, so forgive me. But she's a long history in the energy management world, energy sales world as an employee at Constellation. I think she would be a good fit on the committee.
So I'll make that as a motion to appoint Mary Stephanidakis.
Stephanidakis.
Thank you.
Stephanidakis.
I got it.
both.
And do you want to make the motion on Ms. Troy as well?
And
The school committee
we have to do it,
designee?
so and I'll make the motion, Ms. Troy, as well. I thought you were saying she was already appointed. Okay,
Well, she's the
gonna-
designee,
yes,
but
okay.
we have to appoint
Right.
as a designee.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion to appoint Ms. Stephanidakis as the town administrator designee and Ms. Troy as the school committee designee. Second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Zulish, yes. Okay, so those are those two.
So
So,
we have one more designee, and is that if we want? Do you want to do it or not? Do you want to appoint a designee?
if we do, sure. I mean, I have an idea, others may, I'll throw it open to the committee first
I
before.
do too, but I think we might have the same one, but I'm not sure, so I could be wrong.
Mr. Chair, why don't you go?
Okay, I'll go, sure. I thought the background of Mr. Israel was compelling for this, as a designee here. He's the director of Climate Scorecard, a nonprofit organization that monitors policies and programs that affect emissions in leading greenhouse gas emitting countries around the world, including the United States. So it seems to me that Mr. Israel, and he has significant work experience in global citizenship, climate change, and international development, and publications as well in this area. So it seems to me that Mr. Israel would add a lot of heft and breadth and depth to this committee. That's
Was that a
my
motion? Was that a
no.
motion?
That's my thought. That's my thought. I
Make
don't
it as
want
a
to.
mo- Just make that a mo-
Well, I want to. Ms. Musto.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think there are a lot of really talented people that have submitted. There are a couple of people that I sort of liked as well. Mr. Taylor, I like the fact that he's the Shade Tree Committee, and I think there could be overlap when we're talking about energy things. Rich Baylor's got some practical experience as well. You've got Matt Panucci from Friends of the Blue Hills. So I think those are just a few, and there are others as well. I'd like to hear if there are any others that people want to bring
I had
forward.
Rich Baylor, that's what, just given, he's been on the planning board for 5 years. He understands how these, I thought his expertise might be valuable there, just infrastructure-wise, as well as his background.
Mhm.
I mean, much like, to Roxanne's point, just much like Matt, Rich is a big Blue Hills guy, scouting,
Yeah.
all that, so much in the outdoors, just.
Other comments? Ms. Bradley.
Thank you so much. So I too had Ron Israel on my short list, even though he's a guy. I'm gonna support him because I really think that he brought something different to the committee, something that I didn't see from any other applicant's resume or application. I thought it was something that he could bring a new sense of urgency to our climate action planning. Well, I concur with Ms. Musto, Member Musto, that Mr. Taylor also serves on the Shade Tree Advisory. I am personally really getting away from one person serving on multiple committees. I feel like people have a say on one committee, and I'd like new voices to be heard. So Ron Israel was my top pick. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Zoll.
I was also, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was also looking at Mr. Israel closely as somebody who used to work for an environmental nonprofit, Conservation International. I think folks that have done work on scorecards in particular around emissions have a lot to add to the conversation here. I tend to agree with Ms. Bradley about not having multiple appointments to different boards. So for that reason, I'm sort of leaning in that direction if we decide to make a second appointment.
All right, so that's where we are. Do we want to, someone want to make a motion?
Make it.
I'll be happy to make it, Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay, great. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Ron Israel to the Climate Action Planning Committee.
And that would be as the select board designee. I'll just suggest that.
Correct. I'm sorry. I
Yep,
didn't
sorry.
finish that.
I'll
Yes.
second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Zulish, yes. The item 11B, the appointment of the school committee designee to the capital improvement planning committee.
So I want to abstain, given I'm chair.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve Dr. Elizabeth Carroll as a school committee designee for the Capital Improvement Planning Committee.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll?
Yeah.
Oh, abstain. Mr. Wells is abstaining. Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
And Mr. Zoll is yes. Item 11C, the Youth Task Force. I'm not sure exactly how many we have to appoint. I know there was one teen on this list, and we have one teen, and we have up to 3 teens that we can appoint. So Giselle DeMonch, I know, has served on the committee before, and I happen to think it'd be a great addition, and she is a teen. So that certainly is one of our appointments. And beyond that, I'm not sure how many, I wasn't sure how many more appointments we have.
Mr. Chair, why don't we just do this one tonight and get it done? So I'll make a motion to appoint Giselle DeMonch to the Youth Task Force.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Zulish, yes. All right. I'm not sure how many more we have.
You got time, you can look at that, figure it out, we can do it at a later meeting.
Do we want to
Yeah.
defer
Can we
that?
do it next time,
You want to
Mr.
defer?
Chair?
All right.
Yeah.
Consensus is to defer.
It's 10 o'clock.
All right.
Maybe Mr. Milano can let us know how many we have left?
Okay, that's great. I'm sure he'll do that.
Sorry,
No.
Nick.
All right, item 12, donations to the Milton Coalition.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the donations to the Milton Coalition in the following amounts: $100 from the Congregation Beth Shalom Blue Hills, $720 from the Milton Rotary Club Foundation, Inc., and $500 from the First Congregational Church of Milton.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Zulish, yes. We're cooking with gas now. Item
Just say the number.
13.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to authorize the town administrator to execute contracts for $50,000 or less in fiscal year 2023, fiscal year 2024.
In 2024.
I said that. I said
Oh, you did,
I
sorry.
said both. I said
Sorry.
that.
Sorry.
I'll second, but I do have a quick question.
The motion's been made and seconded. Ms.
Very
Musto?
quick question. What do we have in place now in terms of what you can approve?
I kick everything to the select board in terms of contracting.
You do, okay.
And it would be for obviously ease and efficiency to move it this way for this dollar figure.
Yeah.
Once you get over the $50,000 threshold, that's where you start getting into sealed bids and everything. So it's
Yeah.
it's a more challenging, more cumbersome procurement and contracting process. So if there's a smaller number, I'm fine with that too. It's just trying to ease some processes here.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Zoll.
Just a quick suggestion, maybe in a couple of months, we could kind of just get a rundown of the contracts that you've okayed and just kind of get a sense of what's been going on. I think that'd be helpful.
Okay.
I think in terms of process, it would be a good idea to the board, for the board to not within a couple of months, really just every meeting, any contracts.
Any
Sure.
update,
Sign,
yeah.
just a listing.
Can do. Yeah, I can do that. Thank you.
Great, and
Mr.
that can
Chair,
be,
I
oh,
have a hand
I'm
up.
sorry, Miss Bradley, I missed you.
It's okay. I could stop my video, but I didn't. I'm wondering if that should go through the financial committee or if it should go through the select board committee.
I'm with Ms. Bradley. I think it's more than enough.
Well,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
I'm with you. I think it's more than enough. I think the finance committee more than, just one more thing. that-
oh, you mean,
For the
you mean,
report back?
you mean for the report back?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I'm okay with that. And I was actually going to suggest, I think it's a great suggestion. I was actually going to suggest he can Mr. Milano can circulate that to us by email.
Time
There's
is a
no,
utility,
there's no
Mr.
reason,
Chair.
there's no reason he can't just circulate that as an update.
Yes,
Correct.
keep us in the loop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells? Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Zulish, yes. Item 14, discussion.
Some do it. I have to abstain. Some don't.
So the discussion approval of the one-day liquor license for the Milton Music Fest and fireworks.
I'll make a motion to approve since I can't go because I'm at a wedding.
Oh,
I will
okay.
second that.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. This is the license is for Linda Lee Sheridan and Cypress Catering. And this is for a great event on Saturday, June 24th from 5 to 11, and Sunday, June 25th from 12 to 9 at Hutchinson Field. And we're going to waive the motion is to waive the $50 fee. This is a great event, and I believe it's the 10th anniversary
It is.
event.
Great event.
So motion's been made and seconded, I believe.
I did, yeah.
Oh, motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Oh,
Yes,
Oh, I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
You
Yes.
skipped one.
I'm really sorry.
Oh, no, no,
So, so as a member of the finance committee for the
Oh.
last year-ish, I understand that everybody loves this event and everybody loves Linda Lee and it's nothing about her and it's nothing about this event, but this is a slippery slope. And I'm just gonna say it. I don't think it's okay to waive the application fee for anybody in the town, whether or not it's a nonprofit. It's $50. It's literally $50. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but we are looking at an override. Like, everybody has to understand what's about to come down the pike. And I'm looking at every dollar, and I have to look at every dollar, which is why I was so adamant about the plate and that license. Like, we have to at some point say the town has every right to charge somebody. Like, I will pay the $50 fee. Like, I don't understand why we're waiving the $50 fee, Mr. Chair.
So I'm interpreting it as a suggestion for a friendly amendment
Thank you.
to delete the waiver of the $50 fee.
Yes, I think it's wrong.
And that would be to the movant and the second. Mr. Wells.
I just to the point. Historically, we waive fees on town events. We don't charge it. This grew out of the 350th. This is truly a quasi town Milton Music Festival event. To Ms. Bradley's point, the town could have never afforded the 350th, and as you know, the entire 350th was paid for, the prior donation. The same with this. This was kept going at the request of the citizens of this town. It is the largest event, community event we run, 5,000 attendees every year.
And they all
I've
pay
never
money.
seen, let me just finish one second, Aaron, I'm sorry then. I've never seen that ever on Wave, I don't know why, maybe Mr. Lano never, but I've never seen this on there before, but I'm fine with that. If you vote what you want, I'll call Chair Linda Lee tomorrow, but that's how this comes. This is an event for the citizens of Milton, and as far as the sponsors, the sponsor of the event, Aaron, is giving more dollars and cents to everything you've talked about than I could count in my head.
Richard, don't do that. It's not about that. It's about the fact that we have to now make a stand of our town does not have enough money to pay for the services it has, period. And if any one of you would like to tell me that we do have the money to pay for it, I would love that.
I'm not saying that.
It's not about the person. It's not about anything, how many people it benefits. I don't give a crap. It's $50 and I want it in our bank account. And I will do this for everything because we are up against the wall until we can get some revenue happening in this town, period.
Other comments or questions? I was going to observe. Ms. Musto.
I would like to know what we've done before with this, because it seems to me if this is something that's for the community, and this, and we have a 350th committee and so forth.
I'll pay the fucking $50.
Easy,
sorry,
easy.
sorry,
Yes.
I'm not on mute. I will
Yes.
pay the $50.
We're on the air. We're on the air, please.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
I just want to know what the process has been before.
Ridiculous.
This is just a continuation of what's been for 10 years, since the 350.
And that was the records that we had.
Okay.
But I didn't feel I had the authority to waive a fee, so felt like it was appropriate to bring it to the board.
So I will observe that this is something the board has done in the past, and I will also observe that it is a good point that Mr. Wells raises, that in terms of the bang for the buck, we are getting a significant financial advantage from this because of the financial donation that is going towards this. I understand Ms. Bradley raises a very important point and a good point, and we need to be careful about the precedent. But I think in this case, because of the financial benefit that the town is getting in return, which is far in excess of that fee, then maybe it makes sense to do. So the friendly amendment has been suggested to the movement, who I think was Mr. Zoll. Or
I made the original motion to
Yep.
approve
so there's been
the
a friendly
application and to waive the fee.
right. So the
I'll withdraw, Mr. Chair, I'll withdraw.
okay. All right. So we have the motion's been made and seconded. Made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Ms. Bradley,
No.
Ms. Musto,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
I'll abstain.
and Mr. Zoll.
Yes.
And Mr. Zoll is yes. So I'm slowing down.
Mr. Chair,
I'm slowing. Ms. Musto.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Did we skip number 14?
Did I miss something?
Or do I have the wrong?
That was number. That was number.
That was 14.
it.
Oh, so I don't have the updated one. That's why I don't have the updated one.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I printed it earlier.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll make
Thank
a
you.
motion to approve the
Thank
minutes 15 of May 1st, 2023, May 2nd, 2023, May 4th, 2023, May 8th, 2024, May 9th, 2024, and May 23rd, 2023.
We've got two 2024s in
I
there.
know we do. How do we change that? I'm like, so change those to 23, 23, and 23. 8th, 9th, and 23rd.
Wow.
Sorry.
It did feel like that town meeting went on for a year.
I'll second that with those changes.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Ms. Bradley?
Well, I think I have to abstain from some of them because I wasn't there, unless it's okay with the members of the board that we can vote in favor of things we were not there for.
You know which
No.
ones they were?
I mean,
I think
You
Aaron
abstained.
missed the first one, right?
Do you want to take them
That was it.
individually
It
then?
was just the first one you missed?
Mike?
we can.
You might have.
I mean, Richard and I
missed
one,
The first one.
and I think you missed
I
one.
missed May 4.
Like, I'm fine with us all voting in favor as long as everybody else is okay with that.
I'm fine with that.
Ms. Musto.
I think technically, Mr. Chair, I think technically you cannot do that. I think you have to vote only on the ones that you were at.
So why don't we
Or-
make them individually?
I'm gonna amend my motion, so let's go
Yeah.
one at a time.
Yeah.
May 1st.
I will just say,
Sorry.
I will just say, going forward, I have a different view that I think, just as we, as other board members can be persuasive in a motion, I think if another board member said, yes, they reflect what the minutes were, I think a member can. I think a member can abstain as well. I think you can, but I don't think there's any, I don't think you're precluded from doing it, but it may not be the practice that you wish to. Ms. Musto.
I was going to say, I think that that's tough to do if, I mean, I understand what you're saying about the minutes, but
Yeah.
they don't always capture everything that's going on in a room.
Yeah.
So I just think it's better to separate them out. If it takes an extra 5 minutes,
It's a
we'll make it quick.
It's a very fair point. It's a very fair point. All right.
So I
So
do agree with you, but for the point of.
I know.
May 1st.
can
Oh,
we
no.
actually? I'm trying to think about whether we can do this. Can we make the motion, have it seconded, and then just say, with respect to these minutes, I abstain. With respect to these, and then just capture that in the vote. I think that works.
I do too.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So let's do it.
Go to
So-
each one
so-
motion.
yeah.
but individually, yeah.
All right. So the motion has been made
As is.
and seconded. And when we go around for the vote, each member should say, yes, but I abstain with respect to these
Whatever date.
minutes. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Ms. Bradley.
Hi, I vote yes, except for, I'm looking at the dates. Except for May 1st. I abstain from May 1st
Okay.
only.
Ms. Musto.
Yes, on all of them.
Mr. Wells.
Yes, abstain for May 1st, May 2nd.
Mr. Zoll.
Yes, abstain from May 4.
Mr. Zoll is yes. We did it.
There we go.
All right.
We found a way.
Yes. Item 16.
Can you write that down? So you remember that?
I know. I've got to get, I know when we had the discussion before, we need to do the consent agenda. We didn't get it for tonight, but we will. We will going
You're gonna
forward.
want that.
We should have had it for the animal shelter discussion on the consent agenda.
Yeah.
All right, town administrators report, item 16. Mr. Milano.
3 quick things. Building Commissioner Joe Achu started on Monday. Civil Engineer Sky Berube started on Monday. Excited to have them in the fold. MBTA Communities Forum, next one is this Thursday, June 15th. That's at 6:30 at the Keys Room over in the library. It will be recorded, and we'll get that up on Milton TV shortly after it. And then the MBTA reached out that they're organizing a Mattapan Line Transformation Program public meeting. That's next Tuesday, a week from tonight at 6:30. It's on Zoom. You have to register beforehand, and the link to do so is on our homepage. It's also accessible through the MBTA website. So that's the latest update on what they're doing on the Mattapan line. So hopefully some news on that front. Yes.
Do you want to just make a comment, Mr. Milano, about that sound study and that you're trying to get that?
Oh, sure. I had mentioned this at a prior select board meeting that the MBTA was conducting a sound study survey over at the Reedville station, essentially. That was not distributed from the MBTA to the town of Milton, although they were explicitly looking for Milton residents to respond to it. And in addition to that, people who, not everybody could access the survey, so we're working with the T, hopefully, to get them to open that up to residents. They've been resistant at first, but we're continuing to work with them on that because we've heard some feedback about concerns over that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. Nothing from, yes. Item 17, Chair's report. I do not have a report for this evening. Item 18, public comment response.
Covered it all.
Item 19, future meeting dates.
Bradley,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Erin, this is a public comment response? Yep.
So,
please.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to ask you to help be a champion when We have people come for public comment to help encourage the change that happened years ago under your command where we became a select board. I mentioned this under Chair Doyle's, I want to say reign, but that's not the right word, during Chair Doyle's leadership. And it's something that I think that when we all call it out, I think it will help instill the change that you help make possible. So in response to the public comment, that's something I would like to see that not only you, but other members of the select board started to do just in public, because it all starts from just saying this is something that was important.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. And how about, and perhaps before public comment at the next meeting, maybe a blanket suggestion or a blanket reminder?
I would appreciate that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, just a blanket reminder. I do think some of the lack of updating resulted in the fact that we were dealing with documents and people who were on this body before it was called the select board. And so I recognize that the need to update, but I think to give the benefit of the doubt, I think because we were dealing with some things in the past, it got a little bit difficult for people. So,
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Zoll.
I thought, Ms. Bradley, I also want to commend you actually for noting the time limits for speakers. I think
Thank
the
you.
reason we're here now at 10:16 p.m., not totally in part, but I wonder if there's a good way, because I understand obviously we all have relationships with people in town, and when people are speaking, we're like loath to interrupt them, but also we can't let everyone come up and speak for 10 minutes. I'd love us to come up with a polite but audible way to signal to a speaker that their time is ended.
And that's on me. And I will talk to Mr. Milano about perhaps getting a clock.
We used to go on a clock. We used to
Yeah,
go on a
well,
clock.
perhaps having a clock and
Little,
doing that.
little bell.
I was just saying that hit the clock.
It's like a spelling.
I will tell you my thought process in this was that we do set aside 15 minutes, and it appeared that we had 2. So I thought a little leeway might be helpful. And we had someone who it was difficult for the person to be here. So I thought giving a little extra leeway, but it's totally on me, and I'll do better.
I agree, though, as chair, it's certainly your prerogative. You are right. A lot of times people forget. It is 15 minutes. We do set 15 minutes
Well,
aside, yeah.
No, but it's a very fair and good point that I need to do a little better on that. Ms. Musto.
I do have a quick question, Ms. Milano. I don't know. There was one point during Citizen Speak where the first speaker talked about, I just wrote this down, an ADA coordinator. I just wanted to know if you could speak to that at all, or how other towns handle that, and is this something that we do already, we should be doing, or that we could combine with other towns to do?
If I could just because it's not on the agenda, and
Yeah.
so could we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting, and then maybe you can connect with Mr. Milano separately.
Okay, I was just
outside
trying
the
to
meeting.
respond to that.
No,
So,
I
yeah, I get it.
totally get
That's
it.
fine.
Yeah, but we have to be a little bit careful. If Kevin Freitag were here, he would admonish me for that.
Okay.
He's not.
He is actually.
I think he is.
He is actually. So we'll be on our best behavior. Anything further on public comment response? On future meeting dates, we have listed the 27th, July 11th, and July 25th. Any issues with those?
I'll be gone on the 11th, but as I am normally, so don't just.
Okay, all right. And I will note, we have had a request from a resident, Cindy Christensen, to get on the agenda for one of these meetings, wants a time on the agenda to talk about, I believe it's in opposition, her amicus brief in opposition to the town's position in the 4L litigation. So as evidenced by the fact that it's almost 10:20 tonight, we do have very packed agendas. So if any member has a particular interest in having that, I have offered obviously to have her come to public comment, but that has been a request. And I recognize that we had too much of our agenda was too packed tonight to do it. And so if any member is interested in putting that on the agenda ahead of all of our other things, just let me know. All right, executive session. I'm going to move to enter into executive session to discuss litigation strategy against the MBTA related to the condition of the stairs of the MBTA station located at Adams Street, Milton, Mass. Based on my belief that discussion of this matter in open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Select Board will return to open session. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Zulish, yes. Second, I will move to enter into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with A, the clerical unit of the Southeastern Public Employees Association, B, the Milton Professional Management Association, C, the Milton Firefighters Local 1116, D, the Milton Police Association, and C, the Milton Superior Officers. Based on my belief that discussion of this matter in open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the Select Board will return to open session.
You want a second?
Yes, please.
There you go.
Motion been made and seconded.
I kind of forgot where.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Zulish, yes. Finally,
You're there. Oh,
I
go
don't
ahead. No, go
know
ahead.
if we have anything on this. I don't know if we have anything on this. We should just update. I moved to enter into executive session to discuss the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, parentheses, Blue Hill Ave, B75, and 676 Brush Hill Ave, B74, based on my belief that discussion of this matter in open session may have a detriment. No, this is because this is may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the Select Board, and the Select Board will return to open session.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Excuse me. So it's Brush Hill Road, not Ave.
Did I say road or have?
It says Ave,
It says
but
Ave.
it's
Did I
road.
say it? I thought I
No,
said
it's
road.
typed that way.
It's typed that way.
Right, but I thought I
You
said.
said road, but it says Ave.
Yes, it says Ave here, but I think I said road. But if I didn't say road,
You did. Second.
motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
And Mr. Zulus, yes, and we will return to open session for a brief period of time after the executive sessions. So we will see you then. Thank you. And we're back, returning to the June 13, 2023 meeting of the Milton Select Board. Item 23, discussion approval of memorandum of agreements with the Milton Police Association and the Milton Superior Officers for the period July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2025.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
I make a motion to approve the bargaining agreements MOU between the town and the Milton Police Patrol Officers Association and the Milton Police Superiors Officers Association. July 1, 2020, what's the?
2022?
2022 to
June
June
30th,
30th, 2024.
2025.
2025, I'm sorry.
And I second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus, yes. We have a motion?
Motion
So
to adjourn.
moved. Motion adjourned. Second.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Absolutely.
Mr. Zoll?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Zulus, yes. Thank you, everyone. We will see you again on June 27th. We apologize for the lengthy meeting. Good night.